Good morning, everyone. My name is Jesus Pantel. I am the Cultural Funding Supervisor for the City of Austin Economic Development Department's Cultural Arts Division. We are doing our Elevate Review panel for individuals and creative businesses. Today is day 9. We have 10 panels total for individuals and creative businesses, and then 9 for nonprofits in our Thrive and Elevate program. With me is DJ Lozada. She is our outside equity facilitator. She's ensuring that both city staff as well as our review panelists are keeping equity top of mind as these applications are being reviewed. The applicants have reviewed all of the applications prior to today, and so they have tentatively scored them. They may or may not change their scores depending on the feedback they receive from their fellow panelists. They're not required to do so, but they can if they'd like. They are not scoring on consensus, so they may or may not have different takes. If they do have different takes, that's fine. We brought them on board for their various areas of expertise. If they do have similar thoughts, we have asked that they not repeat anything that has been stated by other panelists. So if they don't have any commentary, it's just that they're in agreement with what has already been stated. We have asked them, though, if they do have different thoughts, even if they have a concurring opinion on the application, if they have any thoughts that weren't stated, to be sure to state those. We will be timing the applications today with a maximum minute of time, 10 minutes per application. We will pause the timer if there's any kind of technical difficulty, someone's internet is going slow, anything like that. Let's see. We have asked the panelists to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent that they can. If they are familiar with you or your work, they can use that knowledge when they are scoring your application, but only if they have one-on-one knowledge and experience of your work. They can't use secondhand accounts, if their friend is familiar with your work, for instance. Also, they were not required to, but if they went to your website or your social media to gather more information, they can use that as well in considering how to score your applications. But they do need to otherwise score the applications based on how your individual application meets the review criteria. They are not comparing one application to another. They are scoring each application individually based on how it meets the review criteria. So with that being said, we will get started with our first application up for review, which is Sarah Bork. Tran and Laura are our primary and secondary, and the 10-minute timer will start whenever Tran starts giving her commentary.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Tran. I'm the primary reviewer for Sarah Bork. Sarah is a visual artist based in Austin, in 2D, 3D curator, etc. And they're requesting $30,000 to put together a fine art gallery show and photo book. And this is out of kind of their practice, Girls Gotta Eat. And they're interested in mounting 2 fine arts photography show and then compiling interviews and pictures in a coffee table book. Also putting together, hosting a drag brunch in the downtown Austin area and looking to bring a version of the show to nursing homes around Greater Austin. And I was really, interested in this. Definitely a really interesting proposal. I ended up scoring a 60, and this was based on what is kind of presented in the area of outreach, of kind of historical kind of significance, and then also thinking about kind of the impact of the work. I was definitely really, this type of work is definitely really important and critical, especially in the arts and cultural community, and then also thinking about the diversity that it inhabits too, which includes a lot of communities of color, also individuals too, and wanting to support that. So I was definitely really interested in the work and wanting to see how it can really thrive.
Thank you. Secondary, Laura.
Thank you. I had a similar take on this application. I will just add that while the applicant has a clear working relationship with their key constituencies, they acknowledge that they don't have lived experience within these communities. So to that effect, it was very helpful to have the supporting materials, the letters of recommendation that spoke to that from members of the community that there are in their key constituencies.
Okay, and with that, are there any other panelists who would like to offer a perspective that has not been spoken to before or may have a differing opinion? Okay, Ursula?
I really liked this project a lot. I appreciated the collaborative aspect of bringing in drag artists and providing them opportunities to showcase their craft in person, because that's very impactful for drag in particular. Something that I would recommend that wasn't spoken about in this specific application was that the grocery lists are not translated in any other language other than English. And I think that that might be a low cost opportunity to create more access, because grocery lists are usually pretty simple language, and it is going to be an easy step for them to translate that into top languages of potential audience members. That was something that I wanted to suggest to the artists specifically.
I agree with that, and I think some of the marketing kind of outreach too. It seemed like it was geared towards very like social media, kind of radio, very like a younger crowd. And so I was wondering about like older people, elders, just other kind of that could be not kind of part of that of outreach specifically.
I have a couple of comments I would like to add. That among the public activities that are listed in the proposal, there are two that I would like to mention. One is hosting a drag brunch. That doesn't sound public to me. Then bringing a version of the show into nursing homes. It'll be helpful for the proposal writer to explain why nursing homes. Because this is, I mean, if there is one group in our cities that most likely do not go grocery shopping are people in nursing homes. So I find this a disconnect with the show and that part of the public.
Okay, are there any more comments or? Okay, with that, I'll turn it back over to Jesus.
Thank you, DJ. And Sherry is here with us. Her internet's just a little bit slow, so she has her camera turned off, but she is here while this application is being reviewed. I will notice a couple of things just for clarification. In their marketing plan, staff has not reviewed these applications in depth, but we are following along as the applications are being discussed. There was mention, in addition to the online or social media kind of stuff, I did see coverage of the events in the Statesman and the Chronicle, which are our daily and weekly alternative news weekly newspapers here in Austin. They also talk about radio stations, the morning show on KXAN, which is a local TV station. So just keeping that in mind as you are scoring the applications. And as far as the public activities of like nursing homes and drag brunch, if the application does score high enough to receive funding, staff will work with the applicant before entering into the grant to make sure that all the activities that they do are eligible and appropriate for the grant. With that being said, any final thoughts, additional comments that you have that have not already been stated by another panelist? Sherry?
Thank you for the recognition. No additional comments. I think everything I had was covered. Thank you.
Great, thank you. If there are no other comments from any other panelists, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so by raising your hand. Sherry, I guess you can just turn your camera on real quick to let me know that you're done. Okay, great. Thank you. Sherry, Laura, Tran. And you can lower your hand once I call your name. Ursula. And while we're waiting for Cecilia to finalize her scores, the 10-minute allocation of time is only to review the application. We have stopped the timer, so there's no more discussion on this application. But since each application is scored individually, we ask the panelists to finalize their scores before we move on to the next application. And there is no submit button.
Is there a way to adjust the score globally, or does it have to be on each rubric?
I think it's in each rubric item. So if there's a specific rubric item that you wanted, if you could finalize it that way. And there is no, if you don't have any changes to your score, there's nothing you need to do. You just keep it as is. And if you do, there's no, save or submit button other than like how you initially entered your scores in.
Done.
Great, thank you. We will move on to our next application, which is craft. Ursula and Tran are our primary and secondary. And Ursula, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. Craft is asking for $30,000. Most of the budget is going for administration of the daily operations of the organization itself, and also expanding their access. Primarily what they listed was accessibility for crafters who come to use the facility in wheelchairs, and also the deaf community. I did appreciate how specific they were in their plans to expand access, because this organization did list a very broad key constituencies, more of serving Austin at large. And as a result, they do list a diverse group of people who come and participate in this crafting organization, because they're providing affordable craft studios and a craft buffet and workshops. And I do really appreciate their focus on removing the financial barrier for people to interact with craft, and that as a result creates quite a diverse background of people who take advantage of this resource. The weaker spots for my scoring was in cultural background of leadership. She does a great job of listing her experience as a leader, but it doesn't reflect the specific groups that she's talking about reaching out to, as far as the communities with disabilities and primarily people of color. So I was unable to give her high scores in the sections that covered her cultural experience, reflecting the expansion that she hopes to use this funding for. I personally really appreciate focusing on craft. As society gets more digital, I think we lose a lot of respect culturally for craft, and the accessibility of that. I scored pretty high just for the overall concept, and how focused she is on removing barriers and accepting in collaborators who do reflect the constituencies she's hoping to reach out to. Although her collaborators are not specific enough for me to feel like they are a part of this this step of the process, and having control and power in the grant writing and leadership from the very beginning and the inception of this step of reaching out to more communities. So my recommendation would be to maybe use this funding to create a position of cultural outreach that can be held by someone who reflects the communities that she's hoping to serve for this specific grant and how we score.
Thank you. Secondary, Tran?
Yeah, I agree a lot of what Ursula shared. It seemed that the applicant Eli, who's the owner and listed ultimate decision maker, a lot of I think the vision and outreaching to communities, specifically she mentioned the Deaf Film Fest and communities such as Vietnamese, Korean, Chinese, and Spanish speaker, but it didn't seem that it was really targeted in terms of the strategy, and so it was like the disconnect wasn't as clear for me, and so there's I think a lot more kind of opportunities there to to really elaborate on that. I think in terms of craft, there's definitely I think a need, but it for the most part the application didn't stood out for me specifically in what will make this kind of different than kind of right now not having kind of that opportunity and how that will stand out. Yeah, so overall those were the kind of the area, but definitely it is a a critical area that more kind of opportunity should be there.
Okay, thank you for those remarks. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on a topic that hasn't been discussed yet, or who may have a differing opinion?
Yeah, I just would like to
Oh.
add is from as I read the proposal, their mission is very noble. It's a noble endeavor. That is, the mission is to serve everyone's crafts as a craft room for everybody, which is wonderful. But at the same time, or because of that, is like key constituencies do not seem to be the community groups that are at immediate risk of cultural erasure and displacement in Austin.
Thank you. And we do have, excuse me, we do have Sherry here as well. Her camera is off just to boost her internet connectivity, but she is reviewing these applications. Any comments, Sherry?
My comments have been represented by other presenters. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I thought I saw someone's hand briefly.
Oh, did someone else have a comment?
Maybe I was incorrect. No, we're all good, panelists? Okay, Jesus.
All righty. Thank you, everyone. If there are no further comments, please let me know when, please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sherry, Laura, Cecilia, and Ursula, and Tran. All right, thanks, everyone. We will move on to our next application, which is Austin Cantorum. Oh, no, excuse me, Nepantla Union. Nepantla Union is our next application up for review. Cecilia and Ursula are our primary and secondary. And Cecilia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, Nepantla Union is asking for $30,000, and it is a multidisciplinary creative community space that includes poetry, art exhibits, talks, music shows, film screenings, large-scale art installations, markets, fundraisers, and culinary pop-ups. But what really struck me with this proposal that I love is that they provide free and low-cost spaces for artists to create, ensuring all artists that meet their mission, regardless of their economic background, they have the opportunities to develop and show their work. So what they are proposing to do is there are like two things. One is a neighborhood Molino grand opening, and in collaboration with another group, and a revival project for the Nepantla Union. They describe their key constituency very clear, and they are aligned with the mission of the Elevate and Thrive grants, and they have a clear itemized budget. I had no questions about it. It was a delight to read.
Thank you. Secondary, Ursula?
I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think I was very impressed that they offered curatorial opportunities. That is not common in my experience as an artist and a gallery owner. To be able to give creatives and artists the opportunity to have the power and control to not only express their stories, but to help create a larger story and language that involves more collaborative elements is really impactful for not only providing a platform for their own voice, but to really showcase their opinions and where they're coming from and their perspective and their point of view. I think curatorial experience is a great medium for uplifting voices. And they do a really good job explaining that in this application. And I was really impressed by how ambitious their programming was. And they provided enough information for me to have an incredible amount of faith that they're going to execute this well.
Okay, we'd like to open this up to other panelists who would like to contribute to the discussion about this particular grant. So in this case, I would like to call on Noctron. If you would share, do you have anything you wish to share about your experience with this application?
For some reason, it's taking me a little longer to load. I'm just looking at my notes. I score on the higher end. I was also really interested in just how they kind of frame themselves. Fact that it's really bilingual and also multilingual too, and just it seems like really rooted in the community and prioritizing various artists, just environmental kind of inclusive environment. So it was definitely, and it really showed in their kind of both their history and how they frame it, and also kind of their outreach in communities. So it was on mine, it was on the higher end.
Okay, and Laura?
I agree with, in general, what has been said. I would just, I had a couple questions in reading the application about it was unclear if their current space actually meets the ADA requirements, and that the budget seemed to include some capital improvements. So those were just things that I noted, that if they receive funding might need additional clarification during that process.
Okay, Sherry, did you have anything you'd like to offer?
Just also my scoring was on the higher end for this application, and it was quite helpful in their presentation as it aligned with the criteria. So it was a well-written application.
Okay, and having heard from everyone, Jesus, I will turn it back to you.
Great, thank you, everyone. For the budget comment, staff will, if the application does score high enough, we'll work with the applicant prior, as Laura was alluding to. We'll work with the applicant before we enter into the grant agreement, just to make sure that everything is correct. Capital expenditures are not allowed in Elevate. They are allowed in certain circumstances for Thrive, but this is the Elevate review panel. But with that being said, just keep in mind, you know, as you're scoring the application, it's not necessarily an ineligible affects the eligibility of the applicant, just that particular item, staff would work with them if they score high enough to receive funding. I think that was all the the other clarification is Sherry's internet is being a little bit slow, so that's why she is here, but sometimes on camera, sometimes off. With that being said, any final comments or thoughts that haven't already been stated, panelists? If not, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Sherry, Ursula, Cecilia, Laura, and Tran. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Austin Cantorum. Sherry and Cecilia are our primary and secondary. And Sherry, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. Austin Cantorium is applying for $30,000 for an event called Biophilia. If I'm hoping I am pronouncing that correctly. And this organization describes itself as providing a wide range of choral enthusiasts or being an organization of choral enthusiasts and music lovers. And their intent is to provide a choral ensemble activity. This application was an interesting read. However, my feedback would be that the organization consider how this activity aligns with the priorities of the city and this particular application process at this time. I was unable to score this application really high because I found sort of significant details that were missing to demonstrate the alignment with the priorities. I think the applicant did acknowledge that they are working with the community and have used surveys, for example, to try to find, to get community input on their projects that could better inform this project. And I think that is something that they have acknowledged is going to be critical in beefing up this proposal. Those would be my comments.
Great, thank you. Secondary, Cecilia?
Yes, I was not able to give a high score to this proposal, and the main reason for it was I truly do not know if this is a secular or a religious event or series of event. If they are secular or religious, it'll be helpful for the writer to state so, for the reviewers just not to leave it to their interpretation. And so that's my main concern. There's a long list of churches in the proposals. And at some point in the proposal also says that, we are proposing to have this in the Wildflower Center because some people might be hesitant to go to Christian churches. So they know that there is the religion issue in our community. So that was my main concern. That is my main concern. I just do not know if this is a secular event for the public.
Thank you. I will provide a little bit of clarity. And again, staff has not reviewed these applications in depth. We've only done a cursory review to determine eligibility. In general, we do allow events in churches or other religious houses of worship, as long as they are open to the general public and not just adherents of that particular faith. With that being said, if it's unclear in the application, whether it's religious or secular, like if it's only open to adherents of that faith, again, staff has not reviewed these in detail. So just keep that in mind as you're scoring, that it is okay as long as it's open to the general public. So that being said, are there comments from other panelists? Ursula?
I just wanted to make sure that the applicant understood why I also was unable to give a high score for this specific application. And it mostly stems from how broad the key constituencies was listed as, because every scoring question, or almost every scoring question, comes back to who are the key constituencies. And it was listed as music lovers. And that was much too broad for me to award the highest scores for this specific grant program. So I think it would be in their best interest to, if they wanted to apply to this grant again, is to be a little more focused and specific about who they're hoping to include and use this funding to uplift and provide resources to, more so than just music lovers of Austin.
Is there anyone else who would like to offer a differing opinion or a supportive comment that has not yet been discussed? All right, Jesus.
Thank you, everyone. If there are no further comments on this application, notes or thoughts that you have that have not been stated by anyone else yet, seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Ursula? Cecilia? Laura? Tran? And Sherry. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Socially Immersed. Laura and Sherry are our primary and secondary. And Laura, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. Socially Immersed is seeking $30,000 in funding. Their mission is to use these funds to hire Black artists to create an experience that provides insight into the history and Black backgrounds of Black Austinites. And they seek to partner with other grassroots organizations. And their project is an interactive dinner party series, which is designed to deeply engage attendees with the Black cultural experience in Austin. The accessibility, language accessibility, and intersectionality portions of this application were, I thought, the strongest parts of the application. They do cite some equity work done by other organizations, but I would have appreciated more of a focus on their own work there. It can absolutely be inferred, however, that minority populations are a focus of their work. So overall, this is kind of in the mid-range of my scoring for applications.
Thank you. Secondary, Sherry.
Thank you. And I would only add that I was particularly interested in the opportunity presented for income producing for both the artists participating as well as the educational opportunity for the community. I thought it was an innovative concept in this particular arena. And so this application received a higher end score from me.
Okay, with that, other panelists that want to weigh in or who may offer a similar opinion that has not yet been discussed or a differing opinion.
I second Sherry. I gave this proposal the highest scoring I could. I praise both proposed activities, the interactive meal building and the historical insight. And I think I want one more comment, please bear with me. I think the proposal exercises the highlighting challenges of food insecurity. This takes the proposal to a higher level. Outstanding.
Okay, thank you, Cecilia. Is there anyone else that would like to speak about their particular experience with this application? Have anything to add? Ursula or Nakchan? I don't think we've heard from you.
Um, I would like to ask the other panelists, maybe I'm missing something, because the main issue I had with this application is I was not fully clear if Val's lived experience reflected the Black community. I didn't see any clear demonstration of the cultural leadership section. And that's where everywhere else I gave it pretty high scores, but Val mentions regional lived experience, but I wasn't seeing a very clear description of, was this proposal that is intended to serve the Black community of Austin created by someone who is in the Black community? So if I missed that, did someone else find that information? Because that would change my score.
To that, I actually thought it was clear. I think in the section about who holds the decision making, the person talked about growing up in actually a small town in Alabama. So actually the kind of the lived experience of that and like the collaboration and having faced kind of kind of the post stereotype and biases. So I thought it was kind of that direct correlation.
Does that help you out, Ursula, or are you still having some questions or concerns?
Oh, I'll review that when update my scores. I appreciate the clarification.
Oh, and you're muted, DJ.
I said, thank you, Nakchan, for that input and assistance with your other panelists. And just a little point of personal reference here. This is exactly what it exemplifies to me what the panel, what these sessions are for, so that you can have your questions answered and kind of talk amongst yourselves. You have no requirement to change your scores, but it does help inform you so that you may, if you so desire, either adjust up or adjust down as your lived experience and expertise might have you do. And I'm just excited to see this type of interaction. And with that, Jesus.
Yes, thank you for that, DJ. And I think the applicant will know this because we do provide this, but just so the panel knows and the applicant, sections 1 and 2 have like demographic information and address and stuff like that, and that is not seen by the review panelists, and that is purposeful, so that way demographic information is not coming into consideration. With that being said, if you have questions about someone's lived experience or anything kind of related to that, they would need to make that clear in the application, as sections 1 and 2, again, are not seen by the review panelists. With that being said, any additional thoughts or comments on this application? Were there concurring or differing opinions, thoughts you have that have not been stated by someone else already? Laura?
No, I mean, I think this is clear now, but I did, because I had the same question as Ursula had, so I looked up socially immersed and Val to kind of confirm the lived experience with the community that she's representing. But it was, and this happened in a couple applications where it wasn't clear, because I think they were referencing those demographic questions that we don't have access to. So
yes, no, thank you for that. And again, we try and make it clear to the applicants, but just wanted to provide that point of clarification for them as well, and for you all, so you know. And that's also why we advise you all to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent that you can, and while you're not required to, going to social media or the applicant's website to see if you can glean any additional information. Any other thoughts or comments on this application? If there are no further comments on this application, please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Sherry, Cecilia, Tran, Laura. And again, as Ursula is finalizing her scores, the 10-minute time limit is for the discussion of the application. We ask that panelists finalize their scores as they're not comparing one application to another. They are scoring each application individually based on how it meets the review criteria. So the 10-minute was just for reviewing the application, and then we finalize our scores before moving on to the next application.
Sorry, it was at the crux of so much of my scoring, so I need a couple minutes to just update it thoughtfully.
Sure. Great, thank you. So the scoring has been finalized for this application. We will move on to our next application, which is Stories of the Land Art Exhibit. Tran and Laura are our primary and secondary, and Tran, whenever you're ready to begin.
Hello there. So this project is titled Stories of the Land Art Exhibit. It wasn't clear exactly who the applicant was, but it was like a team, even though the person wrote like, my artistic goal is to produce visual and expressive representation of Mesoamerican and Southwestern Native American ancestral land. The project itself is Stories of the Land, a visual and expressive art exhibit. And there's a clear team, which is really, I think, great. The person who wrote it, but put a team, wanted to have an exhibition with a ceremony, dance, keynotes, kind of visual artists represented, based in Austin. And give me 1 second, I want to make sure. The budget is $30,000, and they're interested in making a very kind of multilingual but rooted in indigenous kind of community and Mesoamerican. And on my end, the application really stood out for me. I scored on the higher end because there's just so much representation and so much aspect of it that is dynamic and rooted in both very teamwork, communities, but in also cross-cultural and also historic ties too.
Thank you. Secondary, Laura?
What up? I agree in general. Couple specific notes I had. Just reiterating that history of service could include a founding history, community service goals, and more examples of opportunity creation would have been helpful. Could be strengthened by elaborating on the desired outcome or impact and how equity is centered, and specifying trained professionals involved in accessibility in general. I would have just really appreciated more details, the targeted outreach among the cities, among their key constituencies, and in marketing that plan for reaching the new audiences. The budget is $3 over the allocated amount for the grant, which I'm sure could be worked out, but just was a note that I had to, and it didn't include rates for payments. That's what I have there. Thank you.
With that, we will open it up to other panelists to either weigh in with their assessment of what has not been discussed, or if they have a differing opinion.
I'm going to start with this. The proposal contains high risk of cultural appropriation. And I have other comments that I would like to get from my notes. I have them here. And sorry, so I have a where is it? I'm getting there. Is yes, on their history of service. In the history of service response, it's just too vague. I find something like this: creating culturally significant tattoo artwork. Significant to which culture? That should be specified. It also mentions volunteering their artwork for Latinx studies. Where? Which institution, school, college? It's not mentioned. Becoming a member of the Native American church. Becoming a member of a church is an individual goal and task. It's not history of service. They also mentioned that they have specifically served the female and LGBTQ diaspora. Which diaspora? I mean, it's just, I don't see the history of service. Yes, and their key constituencies are not community groups that are at immediate risk of cultural erasement and displacement. That's all.
Okay. Is there anyone, the other panelists that would like to weigh in at this time? There's a wide diversity of scoring in this particular grant, and as long as we have the time to do so, Jesus will keep us honest on that. I think it's worthy of a deeper discussion. So if there are any questions or comments, Sherry?
Thank you, DJ. So I was very excited about this proposal for our community. This proposal, however, scored in mid-range for me, and primarily because I think it would strengthen the proposal to expand upon the language accessibility section of the proposal, especially in the Native American communities and potential language disparities that might exist there. So again, very excited about the opportunity for our community. Would have liked to have seen a little more discussion around language access. Thank you.
I just want to add to the history of service. I think that's the comment about that is correct. I'm just like reviewing that portion already, and it is really noticeably kind of missing looking upon that. So that's an area that's making me kind of rethink just that part. I'm just curious why that wasn't mentioned. I'm sure there's things there, but yeah.
That was definitely the weakest part for me as well in this grant, but there were parts of the programming that I did find exciting and engaging. So to think of it through a lens of being at risk of cultural appropriation, that had not occurred to me. And looking at the leadership, my understanding of the lived experiences of the leadership seems to align with the programming that is proposed. And so I think that's why I'm having a hard time understanding what the risk of cultural appropriation is specifically. I agree that the history of service is quite weak. But I think I would appreciate understanding the connection a little bit better of how that would make it obvious that it would be cultural appropriation, because I didn't make that connection, and I'd like to learn more about that, because that would affect my score greatly.
We have just under a minute left if there are additional thoughts or comments on this application.
Okay. Is there any comments about cultural appropriation, Cecilia, since that was a major concern for you? Would you like to elaborate in response to Ursula's question?
Yes, I guess the best that is tied to the rubric in the proposal is, when we look at cultural leadership, when the members of this proposal describe themselves as Mesoamericans. That doesn't exist. So how can
we are at time? That is
Yep.
our time for comments. So that was our 10 minutes for this application. Thank you, panelists. We must end our discussion there. But if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Laura. Sherry, Cecilia, Tran. And Ursula. Thank you, everyone. So that application is completed. We will pause the recording. All right, and we are back from break. Our next application up for review is Patty Bees. Ursula and Tran are our primary and secondary. And Ursula, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. I had a hard time with this application, I'll be honest. I didn't find it to be appropriate for the guidelines of this specific grant funding, primarily because the applicant is seeking $30,000 to create a personal project of his own album, and doesn't connect his album to specifically helping communities that are facing cultural erasure or have faced marginalization. And when he does discuss using the funding to hire collaborators who represent communities of color and I believe he wants to work with a trans artist as well. It feels like tokenism, because I'm not getting any specific description of why he's choosing these collaborators outside of their demographics. And his album and his key constituencies are also extremely broad. So for me, I wasn't able to score highly on this application for primarily the reasons I didn't see how it was serving communities authentically. And his history of service felt like a resume of gigs that he's worked as a DJ. And there's no mention of actually serving communities. So this one, I was unable to find places where I could score it high on the specific requirements of this grant.
Thank you. Secondary, Tran?
I agree. I felt that the proposal wasn't in alignment with the funding, and that happens as an artist. Sometimes, you know, you see funding where it fits, and this one felt like, kind of, as you said, Ursula, like a personal project, and it wasn't in alignment. And that was clear, I think, based on like the budget and everything too. So it's one of those things where sometimes artists, sometimes places, you try to find funding and it's not in alignment, and that was it was clear to me, and so my score wasn't high either.
Thank you, panelists. Are there any other comments or discussion points that have not been discussed that anyone would care to speak on now? Any helpful feedback you'd like to offer the applicant before we move on, since we have quite a bit of time left on to discussion?
Hi, DJ. This is Sherry. I would just offer that I think, you know, I think the panelists have covered my sentiments as well, but I think it is helpful to us as a community to see applications sometimes that don't align, so that we know whether our programs continue to serve the needs of our constituents. So I think that is a positive, even sometimes when we can't hit the mark.
Thank you, Sherry. Any other feedback? Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, for any feedback, I think for any applicant and any kind of opportunity, make sure it's in alignment, because sometimes it's not kind of a waste of time, or sometimes, you know, I mean, you never know, but you know, oftentimes if it's not in alignment, then that's gonna really, that can show.
All right. Any other discussion? If not, Jesus, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. If there are no further comments on this application, thoughts that you have that have not already been stated by others? If not, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Ursula, Laura, Cecilia, Tran, and Sherry. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is East Austin Bosses Music Festival. Cecilia and Ursula are our primary and secondary. And Cecilia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, I want to highlight my gratitude for the writers of these proposals, because they define the who, the what, when, and where with such clarity. And yes, I hope the writers don't lose that in their next proposal, because it really helps the reviewers. Even if you have it, you know, if they have it in a paragraph in whatever section, but just to highlight it, you know, like, you know, bullets, you know, the who, the what. And so their key constituents are very clearly defined. And so their focus, their clarity, and service and connection to community groups that are immediate risk of cultural erasure and displacement in Austin. That is very clearly defined, and it aligns perfectly with the Elevate and Thrive brands. Their key constituencies include underprivileged, underserved African American and Latino musicians and songwriters, as well as tourists, youth, and adults. They have a very noble mission, which is to provide opportunities to struggling musicians from all backgrounds so they can develop, show their talents, connect with fans, and earn money while performing. This is really crucial. So I gave this proposal a very high rating, and that's what I can say.
Thank you. Secondary, Ursula.
I also really appreciated that the key constituencies were very clear and in alignment with the specific grant funding. The place where I was struggling to give a high score was under the cultural leadership. Again, maybe I am missing something, but it was hard for me to see clearly that the people who are making the decisions for this programming live and reflect the communities they're aiming to serve. So that was the only weak point for me scoring wise, because the concepts were great. And I agree it was written very well, but it was a little vague for me on how the leadership reflected the concept in lived experience.
Thank you, panelists. Are there other comments or discussion points that have not yet been addressed? Differing opinions, questions? Please ask them now. Seeing no further
Oh.
Sherry.
I'm sorry, my button wouldn't work. The only thing I would add, this was a mid-range score for me, primarily because in expanding access for this proposal, I somewhat struggled to see specifics on how we would, especially in the event portion of the proposal, make accommodations for people with differing abilities. And so more detail in that area for the networking aspects of this proposal would have been helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. With that, Jesus, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, everyone. If there are no further comments, thoughts that you have that have not been stated by others? Seeing none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Sherry and Ursula, Tran, Flora, and Cecilia. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is This Too Is Austin. Sherry and Cecilia are our primary and secondary. And Sherry, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. This proposer is requesting the full 30,000. And this, I'm sorry, just one second. Moving some screens around here. This proposer is requesting 30,000 for a project that involves poetry. It is an interactive project involving soliciting poets to illustrate their areas of Austin that have particular meaning for them, and having both networking activities as well as having the artists be able to share their compositions related to the various sites that they would tend to illustrate in their poetry. This is a very interesting project, and I appreciate the proposer for their thoughtfulness about the project. However, I did struggle a bit to be able to award more points in alignment with the guidelines of this particular grant making process. So my, I guess my feedback would be a little more detail specific to how the proposal aligns with the city's current priorities would have been helpful to be able to see. And for me, I sort of struggled to see that in this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Secondary, Cecilia?
Yes, since I cannot identify, or I was not able to identify the key constituencies of these proposals, I feel like I could not give a realistic rubric for the cultural leadership section. The cultural activities list several things. It says the public can participate in the project in 5 ways. Submit a poem, attend a recording, listen, attend the podcast launch party. I have no idea about the who, the what, where, and when. And I got totally lost in this proposal, unfortunately. And I want to read this note. First, the writer states that the public can submit poems. Then, in the marketing section, this appears as for poets and members of the community, we would launch a social media campaign to encourage poets to participate and submit their poems. So this is a question from me. So does the public need to be poets? Are poets not members of the community? Again, I'm lost with all this. I was totally lost. I don't know the who, and I don't know who the public is in this proposal. I don't know what the poet's role is. So I could not give a high score because I just did not understand it.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other panelists who have something to contribute that may not have already been discussed? Any points of clarification? Ursula, I am going to
Yeah.
call on you.
I agree. It took me rereading this grant quite a few times to identify the process. But once I had a better understanding, I believed, or my understanding was that the public was assumed to be allowed to participate if they had a poem to share. I don't know if that means they have to identify themselves as a poet, but more of an invitation to the community to express themselves through the medium of poetry, and that would then be reviewed by people who are identifying themselves as poets and have a richer background in the medium, to then curate applications and then work with other community members to use poetry as the art form to talk about gentrification and a sense of place and what that means in Austin, which I found really compelling. I once I could wrap my brain around it, and I think I understood it. I do agree that would be some feedback I would give the applicant. It wasn't very clear the first time around, but I don't see poetry as an art form that is very accessible to the public very often. And so I was excited to really put in some effort to understand the concept, and I was I really liked the idea of them doing the podcast live for the community to come in and actually physically see how a podcast is made and be a part of the dialogue aspect of the process. So there are a lot of elements about this that I thought were very unique and unlike things I've seen before, which for me was pretty exciting. But I was very worried about the marketing strategy. That's where I started to lose momentum, because this is you're asking the community to participate, and everything relies on the content that you're receiving from the public. The marketing strategy is paramount to get those submissions, and there wasn't a very concise or clear strategy that was developed enough for me to have a lot of faith that she was going to get the kind of submissions that she's looking for and hoping for, without making that marketing strategy way stronger and multifaceted.
Thank you. Were you able to identify the key constituencies?
The key constituencies I did think was very broad. My understanding was Austinites, people who live in Austin and interact with the physicality of the city itself. So I agree with you there. That was very unclear for me as well. And they did not receive a high score in that specific category from me because of how broad it seemed. So I agree with you that there was a lack of clarity in a lot of sections. I think where I just got excited was that it was unlike anything I've really seen before.
We have about 2 minutes left. Any additional thoughts or comments on this application? Thoughts that you have that have not been stated by others? Differing opinions, concurring opinions, but different notes or thoughts? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Sherry, Cecilia and Laura, Tran, and Ursula. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Shea Butter Babies Productions. Laura and Sherry are our primary and secondary. And Laura, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. Pull up my notes. Shea Butter Babies Productions is requesting $29,976. They focus on uplifting Black queer artists and Austin's Black community at risk from cultural erasure and displacement. Those that have been marginalized within Austin's art scene, particularly Black artists challenged by economic barriers, and those affected by gentrification. They're seeking funding for a series of inclusive performance showcases. I thought this was an excellent application. I really enjoyed everything about it. I gave it high scores in every section. I thought it was thoughtful, clear, comprehensive, clearly addressed the city's criteria for funding. I particularly appreciated the community involvement and collaborations. It's unique to cite how the artists are involved and encouraged to attend production and planning meetings. And I thought they did a great job of showing how those artists are included in the process throughout, and how that promotes a collaborative environment. And they cited feedback loops for kind of improvement. Those were acknowledged throughout the application. So in an application with a lot of strengths, those were a couple things that really stood out to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Secondary, Sherry.
Thank you. I echo my colleagues' comments. This was a great proposal to read and easily organized in accordance with the items that we as reviewers needed to see. So kudos to the group for that preparation. I particularly wanted to call out their section on operationalized equity work. I think I'm stealing that term in terms of operationalizing equity work. So I just really thank the proposers for their thoughtfulness in preparation. That concludes my comments. Thanks.
All right, does anyone else, other panelists have concurrent opinions or differing thoughts on this application?
Yeah, I have a comment. The key constituencies in this proposal are clearly defined, but I have trouble. I find this proposal in general vague. It lacks focus. Proposed events activities need to be clearly defined. The when and where are defined, but not the who and what. Maybe other reviewers found that information and I would love to hear it, but I didn't. I'm missing the who and what.
Okay, feedback from the other panelists to help Cecilia with her question?
Yeah, my end, it was actually one of my highest scoring application. Cecilia, do you mean like specifically like what they're asking for or what it
Yeah, the proposed event or activity.
um
Who and what?
give me a second, I'll just view that.
So staff has done a cursory glance and is just following along as applications are being reviewed. So I have not reviewed this in depth, but in their proposed activities, their cultural activities, they list 3 different events in October, February, and summer. And they say that it will present a series of high energy, inclusive performance showcases featuring a diverse array of Black, queer, and artists of color. October at Ground Floor Theater in collaboration with Yoso Collective, February at the Ballroom at Spider House in collaboration with Capitol View Arts, and summer 2025 at Ground Floor Theater in collaboration with Thrive ATX. I don't know if you were looking for more specifics, but you know that is some of the information that I see there in their proposed public activities. But I'll leave it up to other panelists if they have additional thoughts or comments. Or Sherry, go ahead.
I just wanted to I think the application further defines the who as Black artists who are challenged by economic barriers and those affected by gentrification. And I know that in our study around these topics, we have, looked at the issue also of gentrification as it affects, displaced communities and the communities of color in our city and in our region. And so again, in the section around key constituencies, there is a description of both Black queer artists and artists in the Black community, but it is further defined, as those artists being marginalized in the Austin's art scene, particularly Black artists challenged by economic barriers and those affected by gentrification. So I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, Cecilia, go ahead. Did you have another comment or question? No? Okay. And I just wanted to remind both for the applicant, if they're watching live or watching recording later, and for the panelists, we are not scoring on consensus, so it's fine if you have differing takes. But at the same time, we do want you, that is the whole point of the panel process, is to discuss the applications. So you all can offer your differing takes. And while you're not trying to convince someone of your score, if they do have questions, or if you do have knowledge, whether it's just something in a particular application or subject matter expertise, that is fine to discuss these applications. So that's what this is here for. With that being said, any additional comments on this application? Thoughts, Laura?
I guess I just wanted to say, because the activities are showcases, it was my assumption that there would be within their defined constituencies with different performers for each of those. So I looked to the leadership for that, and then it felt pretty clear to me that who was participating in those showcases would be from their defined targeted constituencies.
Ursula?
I had that same assumption as well, and I found this grant to be very focused and clear for me personally. I thought it was pretty exemplary, and I enjoyed reading it immensely. And I liked that they didn't fully define every single showcase, because I think it's really important when authentically providing a platform for voices is to give them some freedom to evolve and decide as the year goes on and to respond to one another. And when you too clearly define what a showcase is and what it's going to look like, I think it can break down a lot of the authenticity and magic that can come with collaborative showcases. So I think they did a really good job showing the important details of securing spaces that are ADA accessible, who their key constituencies are, what their mission is. And that was enough for me to trust that these showcases are going to be successful and authentic.
Thank you. We have just under 2 minutes left, so still time if there are any additional thoughts or comments on this application. If there are no additional comments for this application, any notes that you have that have not been stated by someone else? Seeing as there are no additional comments, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Sharon, Laura, Ursula and Tran, and Cecilia. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is the Levite Laboratory. Tran and Laura are our primary and secondary. And Tran, whenever you're ready to begin.
Hello there. So this proposal is by Vamp's Vocals. Vamp Vocals present Invisible Women. They're seeking $30,000 for their operating expenses for 24 and 25 artistic season, which include their November 24 concert and the album release concert in April 25. They're a women-owned LLC with equal partnership. They listed one member as being second generation from a Mexican family, another member, Katrina, being a fierce advocate of Filipino music, third member, Mary Ashton, as a mother of two. And then the total of them are 5, coming from different background and have gravitated towards collaborator and composer. They're different from them. For my scoring, I was in the mid-range. It felt a little bit like kind of that personal. They're wanting to seek funding for their own kind of artistry and everything. On the other hand, there's a little bit of a concert connecting to communities, but for me it felt as though like the fact that they said like operating expenses felt like it was it wasn't towards like a specific kind of project, but it felt it feed it into kind of things that they've been running along. And I felt like more could have been divulged about kind of even their history a bit, even how is this going to connect to kind of local communities. So that in that way, for me, it was more mid-range.
Are we doing Vamp? Are we doing Vamp right now?
Yeah, this was Levite Laboratory. Staff is not reviewed this, so I was trying to follow along, but I'm not sure if we're reviewing the correct application. So we're doing Levite Laboratory.
That sounds like Vamp.
Apologies. I think I led with that.
Okay, we will restart the timer. So let me cancel that. Okay, and thank you, Ursula. I was following along, but I wasn't sure. So trying to find while Tran was talking, but yes, we are doing the Levite Laboratory. And again, Tran and Laura are our primary. Oh, and so Vamp is the next one. So we're the one right before that. Levite Laboratory, Tran and Laura. And Tran, whenever you are ready to begin.
Yeah, second.
Sure. While Tran's pulling up her notes on this application, panelists had about 26 or so applications that they were reviewing. So they have scored and commented on all of them. And then we'll be discussing the applications today. One of the reasons we do ask that they give an intro is just to make sure if there are either applicants with similar names or doing similar projects, since we are not comparing one application to another, but scoring each application individually, making sure we're looking at the right one. And there are a number of them, so just want to make sure we have all that correct.
Great. Okay, I can get started. So Elevate Laboratory, their vision has been to use gospel music to share love for God and people. They're proposing $30,000 to create a series of activities that are concert series that create a safe atmosphere for a discussion of mental emotional well-being. As a group, they're individuals who are Austin-based Black musician and administrators. I thought their proposal was really interesting. The fact that it's coming from, specific community connected to, spirituality, religion. My sense was that it was in kind of in the mid, mid-range. There's definitely a lot of depth in terms of, connection to community engagement. But on the other hand, some of the questions I had was around people who may not be as tied to it, and how would they outreach to people who may not, isn't already connected. It felt like they had a really targeted kind of community and people and families that they're already connected to. So people who don't say follow, the beliefs, and so how would that be able to outreach to people outside of that?
Thank you. Secondary, Laura?
Sure. I got my notes. I agree with the general assessment and the kind of narrow focus of the activities. They do not have plans to include language accessibility, and the marketing strategy didn't include kind of broad efforts to reach. It was unclear if the efforts targeted new audiences within the city's key constituencies. And there was a national PR firm mentioned in the budget that wasn't mentioned in the marketing narrative response. So there was a little lack of clarity around that. It's 2 concerts that they're proposing in, I assume, a relatively small venue. It's a 75 audience is their target size. So that is what's in the proposal, but they do, the majority of the applicants' administrative and creative leadership are deeply rooted in the city's key constituency and have lived experience within those groups. I just would have liked a little more elaboration in some of the later questions. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Now, again, when we have situations where we have the time to do a little deeper dive into discussion, to allow you the room to ask questions, Ursula or Cecilia, would you care to express your experience with this application? And any challenges or comments you might have on the applicant?
I basically have one comment, which is, I do not believe that people who believe in God and go to church are community groups that are at immediate risk of cultural erasement and displacement in Austin. Their key constituencies are not those groups. So I feel this proposal does not align with the guidelines.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
My understanding was that they were acknowledging that church is an integral part of the Black community culturally, and that they were serving Black Austinites and not necessarily Christians. My understanding was that their focus was very clearly on the Black community and mental health. I didn't get the impression that this was innately Christian, as much as that is the language they're using to connect to their own community through their cultural relationship to the church. which I found appropriate for this specific grant because their focus to me was more focused on the Black community receiving mental health resources.
Thank you, Ursula. Cecilia?
Yeah, well, I worry about putting, members of the Black community all in one bucket. I mean, I do understand, but perhaps, I don't know, that gospel music is in part of their culture, but not to all. And it's the same. I will find something equivalent, I'm a Mexican American. When we think about the Virgen de Guadalupe, no, the Guadalupe Virgin, is part of Mexican culture. Is it? I mean, I question that. I do question that. The same way I do question, equating gospel music to the African American community. Is for some or for a section, but it's not. I do not believe that this is aligned with the guidelines of the Elevate grants. And I understood from what you said earlier, Jesus, that the city is able to, to fund activities that occur in a church as long as they're open to the public. So my understanding of that is they can happen in that location, but they're secular. And I have the same issue with this. Is this secular? For me, it is not. And this is aligned with religious groups, and it doesn't align with the guidelines of the Thrive and Elevate. And it's a big concern. And I also, I question is it legal? That tax money goes to religious event? I don't know. My guess is no.
Yeah.
We
we've
live
got-
in a separation of state and church, right? And I hope it
Sure.
continues that way. I hope.
Sure. Yeah, no, and again, we do allow activities that may have could be religious in nature if they are open to the general public. I will say here they do state in their key constituents. We quickly noticed that non-religious organizations sought out the uplifting messages within gospel. Now we have a residency at Stubbs Barbecue, sing at hospice centers through swan songs, and perform for the unhoused community at Community First Village. Wherever we go, we provide representation for the Black community and an invitation for people of other backgrounds to learn more about Black culture. So with that being said, we have about 2.5 minutes left, 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So I want to open it up to other panelist comments if there are any. Sherry?
Yes, thank you. The only thing I wanted to add that I hadn't heard was this proposal scored in the high range for me. I think it's an innovative approach to both the goals of the city as well as the mental health and the supports that we've been talking about all day. But I did want to point out, I think if this proposal advances, we should clarify some aspects of the budget. This proposal came in under budget, so that's a good thing, because I do think sometimes our community members would appreciate some administrative support in looking at their budgets and how they're structured and such. So I just want to raise the issue that there's probably some questions that staff want to ask about the budget to make sure we're on point. Thanks.
Thank you. And the 30,000 is a max request amount. If it's under that, that is fine. Just over a minute left. Ursula, I saw you had your hand raised for a second there.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify that I don't think that all Black people are generalized in the church, because that was a response to what I was saying. And in this proposal specifically, they do have budget and support for Black-owned businesses that are non-secular and restaurants. And I think that shows their effort to have a more holistic and cultural approach that isn't so church-centered. And that was the mentality that I personally saw throughout this whole proposal that was impactful for me.
And the raised fist, since we have 30 seconds, Tran.
Oh, there was this quote too, I think that also supports that too. Well, complaint that while we do employ artists of all backgrounds due to our gospel genre, the majority of our team members come from the Black community. We have watched Black team member walk through the lived experience of moving away from the city center. We're highly motivated by these experiences to continue our standard of paying artists.
And that is time for this application. So thank you, everyone. Please finalize your scores. Again, we are not working on consensus, but we are discussing the applications if there are thoughts as we think through our initial scores. Panelists can change their scores, but are not required to do so. The 10 minutes has allotted for discussion of this application, but you will still have time to finalize your scores before we move on to the next application. Oh, Sherry, Cecilia, Laura, Tran, and Ursula. Thank you, everyone. We will move on to our next application, which is Vamp Vocals. Ursula and Tran are our primary and secondary. Let me get my timer ready. And Ursula, whenever you are ready to begin.
Well, thank you, Tran, because I think you did a great job overviewing it. But to reiterate, this grant is being requested for their upcoming season of shows, and they're a woman-led music performance group, and they are stressing the importance of uplifting female voices. I think the major disconnect for me for this specific request for $30,000 was that the program that they spend the most money on for their season and that they talk about is to fund a male artist. That was a pretty big disconnect for me as the focal point for this specific grant proposal and how we are scoring. And he's being paid to metabolize the interviews with the female musicians. And as a female artist, I don't need any more male perspective metabolizing my expression as a woman. And so it felt at odds with the mission that we're meaning to support through these funds specifically. So that was the part that started giving me some points throughout that I was unable to award the highest scoring. But I do appreciate that they are female led and that and I like the experimentation that they've built into their process and organization by inviting many different artists to come collaborate. But that was the main issue I had.
Thank you. Secondary, Tran.
Thanks for bringing that, Ursula. That's a really good point. On the male artists, they did mention just also a female pianist too, but it kind of what I mentioned earlier, it felt as though like it wasn't like very like community oriented. It just felt like this is their work, and then they're looking for funding to continue their artistic kind of season and their concert. That was the part that like gave me kind of pause. But and now and additionally pointing out that the male artists that they're really trying to uplift and in season kind of their work and vision. But yeah.
Thank you. And Tran had given comments on this application earlier and a different application, so that's why there's those references for that if the applicant is watching and missed that earlier, either watching live or watching the recording. With that being said, Tran, were there any other comments or thoughts that you had initially given that haven't been covered by Ursula that you would like to offer for the applicant? And maybe
No,
there's
other
not.
than, yeah, other than their very female-centric, wanting to uplift women's voices and community, and then the fact that the 5 of the LOC women, very different background, but wanting to work collaboratively and with other folks as well.
Okay, with that, are there any other panelists that would like to weigh in, with comments that have not yet been made or a differing perspective? Sherry, I think I saw your hand.
Thank you, DJ. Yes, I guess this proposal scored in the higher range of my proposals, and I was intrigued actually by the inclusion of the male artist's work, and was intrigued by the section of the proposal that talked about how the male artist actually had participated in interviews and tried to use the words of the female artist in the work that he would ultimately be doing on this project. So I was sort of intrigued and saw it from that perspective. So I just wanted to offer that. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments? Thank you, Sherry, for that.
I would like to make a comment.
Yes, please.
I praise the focus of this proposal on the patriarchal tendencies of men to limit expressions of emotion and vulnerability and the impact it has on humanity. This proposal got a high score from me.
Okay, and thank you for that. I would like to add that intersectionality is widely used to illustrate and the interplay between discrimination, whether it's based on race or on gender, age, class, sexuality, identity, religion, and more. And it is a complex thing to kind of wrap your brain around, but many things can overlap. It's the overlap between those things that are important. And I just wanted to remind our panelists of that important distinction before turning it back over to you, Jesus.
Yes, thank you for that. We have DJ as our outside equity facilitator. Ursula, I see you have a comment.
I think it would have been helpful for me if they did a better job explaining why they selected this male artist and what it is specifically about his professional background that makes him appropriate for this collaboration. I didn't get a lot of context of who this artist is and what his voice is specifically to why he was selected. And I wouldn't have as big of an issue if there was a lot more context and background given on him, because he is receiving much more funding than the other female artists in their programming.
Thank you. Additional comments from the panel? Anything you have that hasn't been stated by others? Seeing as there are no additional comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sharon, Laura, Ursula, Tran, and Cecilia. Alrighty, thank you everyone. That concludes this application. We will pause the recording as we. All right, and we are back from lunch. Welcome everybody to the Individual and Creative Business Day 9 Elevate Review Panel. My name is Jesus Pantel. I am the Cultural Funding Supervisor for the City of Austin Economic Development Cultural Arts Division. We are reviewing applications today again for individuals and creative businesses. In Elevate, with me is DJ Lozada. She is our outside equity facilitator, making sure that we keep equity centered. Both city staff as well as the review panelists while applications are being reviewed. The panelists have reviewed all of the applications prior to today and have tentatively scored them. They will be providing their verbal commentary. Panelists are scoring applications based on how they meet the review criteria. So they are looking for that information and determining how they score each application. They're not comparing one application to another. They are just scoring each application individually, again, based on how it does or does not meet what is listed in the review criteria. Panelists are not required to come to consensus. They may have differing takes on an application, which is fine, or they may have similar takes. And we asked, regardless, that they not repeat any information that has been already provided by a fellow panelist. But even if they are in general agreement with how an application may be scoring, if they do have additional comments that have not been stated by someone else, we ask that they go ahead and provide those. The panelists have been asked to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent that they can. So while they are scoring based on how the application answers the review criteria, if they are familiar with your work, they can use that firsthand experience in considering the application, as well as your website or social media if they went to those to glean more information on your application. We will have a maximum of 10 minutes to review each application. I will be timing those, and if we have any kind of technical difficulties, we will pause the recording. I will give a 2-minute countdown if we get to that point, a 1-minute countdown, 30 seconds will be a raised fist, and then I'll be counting down from 10 seconds after that. So I think that is everything that the applicants watching live or the recording later, how the process will unfold today. So with that being said, we will continue with our next application up for review. Take It and Come. Cecilia and Ursula are our primary and secondary. And Cecilia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, this is the proposal with title Take It and Come. This proposal is about a film screening. It's kind of a work in progress. The applicants, they have been working on a film about gun violence prevention in UT. So they're asking for $30,000 to have a film screening and show it to an audience and get feedback from the audience to finalize the project. I believe this is a fantastic proposal, but the funding is not appropriate to be from Thrive or Elevate grants. I wish the applicant will get financial support from another organization or department of the city of Austin. And maybe, it's because this is about gun violence prevention at UT. This is very specific. And so it's a very novel project, but I don't feel it aligns with the guidelines for the Elevate grant.
Thank you. Before we move on to the secondary, what I will say is for films, specifically documentaries, but also with podcasts, the art form is the documentary or the podcast itself, not necessarily the subject matter. So just keep that in mind while you're scoring the applications. Was there anything related to the rubric, Cecilia, that specifically gave you the lower score, or was it because of the gun violence, being the subject matter? Again, if it's a documentary, that's fine, as long as we don't care necessarily what the subject matter is, just that they're doing some kind of public screening of, in this case, a film.
Right, it's too broad in terms of public. There are no keys constituents are not identified. And it is the scope of the project that I believe does not align with the guidelines. Again, I think it's a fantastic project, just like, a project, if we could eliminate hunger in the world, totally for it, but it should come from different channels, from funding from other sources.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure that just so we're all aware how we're scoring each application. So thank you for those comments. Next up is a secondary, Ursula.
I agree with all that's been said. I think it's a really important project, and I applaud the artist for taking on this subject matter. But I had the same issue with a few other applications when it seems like we're using the funding for one artist to improve upon their own personal piece of work. I don't know if the focus is enough on the audience and the community for this specific funding. Because if we're paying for screening so that the artist can get feedback to make their artwork better, we're not focusing on who the artwork is specifically serving. And I didn't see that connection well described in this proposal, and I would have needed to see that in order to think it was appropriate for this specific grant funding. So I really had similar issues finding key constituencies. I wasn't able to fully identify that. I was wondering, is it UT students? Is it people who have suffered at the hands of gun violence? Is it other documentarians? And without having that focus of who the key constituencies are, it makes it really difficult to award high scores for the remainder of the scoring process.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Are there other panelists that would like to weigh in who may have a similar perspective that has not yet been discussed or a differing opinion?
And you're muted if you were trying to speak. No, maybe not. Okay.
Okay. Jesus?
Thank you, panelists. And thank you for the feedback, Cecilia and Ursula. Staff has only done a cursory glance of these applications just to determine eligibility. What I will say, I understand what you're saying about the more specificity being required. I just want to point out that again, with films in particular, since they can be multi-year long projects, a work in screening or a work in progress screening is fine. That meets our eligibility requirements. But with that being said, the panel does have to score based on what is provided in the application or the research that they have done. And so have to use that information to score appropriately. So with all of that clarification, any additional thoughts or comments that you have that maybe have not been stated by another panelist? If not, please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sherry, Laura, Cecilia, Ursula. And while Tran is finalizing her scores, the 10 minutes is the time allocated for reviewing each application. Again, panelists are finalizing their scores as they're not comparing one application to another. They're seeing how each application meets the review criteria before moving on to the next one. Are you done with Take It and Come, or do you need a bit more time, Tran? Oh, you're done. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. We will move on to our next application, which is Tiger Den Studios, LLC. Sherry and Cecilia are our primary and secondary. And Sherry, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. Tiger Den Studios is requesting 30,000. I'm sorry, I want to make sure I'm on the right one. And their request is actually 29,900. I thought I remembered that. Might be different. Okay. And this proposal is from an organization who describes itself as a main event space. And just one second. They are dedicated to ensuring equity by creating a safe and welcoming space for artists of all backgrounds and identities, and actively provide opportunities for marginalized performers, including those in the LGBTQ+ community, and host events that celebrate our culturally diverse city with a focus on acceptance and inclusion. And this project, this particular project, I apologize, guys. I'm scrolling faster than I can read, apparently. This particular project, I'm sorry. Okay. The requested funding will be used to enhance their efforts at marketing. But I'm sorry, I have missed for some reason. Okay. So the project itself will enhance and promote a series to a Spanish speaking audience in concert with another local organization called the Electric Church. I apologize for my stumbles there. My screen was going a little faster than I could. This proposal received a medium to high score for me, and I think the only feedback that I have is just a tad more detail, but even in suggesting a tad more detail, the applicant did a really good job of identifying how marketing, for example, and funding is necessary in order for them to be able to market appropriately to enhance their connection to their community. So I think that is certainly a point that we're all very much aware of in terms of the purpose for this funding and the projects that we're looking at. So once again, I apologize for taking a little extra time getting together, but that's my primary feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Secondary, Cecilia?
Yes, I gave a high ranking to this proposal, mainly because at the core is they intend to provide, recording space to musicians, is thinking of one's own room, space and financial support are crucial in any endeavor, right? But thinking about artists in Austin, it is of paramount importance, particularly, with all the rent rises and everything. So I really, the key constituents were very well described. Budget was clear, well itemized, and I really praise the goal of this proposal, which is allowing, all the necessary, like space and discount rates for artists. Discount rates for recording and events.
Okay, Cecilia, thank you for that. Are there other comments that have not yet been expressed or differing opinions about this particular application? Yes, Laura.
I specifically with the cultural leadership portion, it was clear that the Electric Church, which is one of the groups that uses the space, has leadership within the key constituencies. But it was unclear to me how Tiger Den's leadership had authentic lived experience, or so if someone else saw that in the application, I would appreciate that, because that was an area that I struggled to give them more points on, specifically that cultural leadership. I also had some questions about the current accessibility of the space and whether it was even ADA compliant as it is now. just in his description of how wheelchairs need to operate to get into the space. And I would have liked to see any accessibility improvements. I guess scrolling to the budget, a little better reflected there. Instead, it's just the bilingual staffing and not anything else. That's all I had to comment. Thank you.
Okay, so just as a point of reference, cultural leadership for the purpose of the rubric that you are grading on, an example of, I'll take one, a low score would be organizations, creative and administrative leadership has a working relationship with the key constituencies, but minimal or no lived experiences within these communities. Or the organization does not provide a clear description of leadership roles, relationships to key constituencies. And I just offer that to you as a reminder as you contemplate scores that you have delivered. Are there any other panelists who would like to provide feedback at this time? Yes, Ursula.
I also had trouble with the cultural leadership finding a clear expression of what Tiger Den's background was culturally, and also I needed a little more information and clarity around if Tiger Den was acting as a subletter and more of a landlord situation, and how they were letting people into the space and how they were selecting their collaborators, and if they had all of the power of curation, and if there was any sort of gatekeeping aspect to how they get to pick and choose the organizations that they are collaborating with. I didn't feel like those details were as were expressed to the degree that I needed to feel confident that they didn't hold all of the creative power in who they share the space with, and if there was more of a divide of who is in charge of the logistics of running the space and who is in charge of the creative outreach and the community outreach of the space. And there was a bit disconnect for me, so they did lose some points in those areas.
Thank you, Ursula. Are there any other panelists that would like to weigh in? Laura, did that help you in any way with your assessment? Okay, wonderful. Any other feedback from panelists? That is a primary example of how the rubric scoring should be there to help you and kind of inform you with your scoring. So if you feel that you have gained a new insight, you have the opportunity to adjust. You are under no obligation to do so, but we want to make sure that you do have that differing perspective so that you can really follow the rubric as it is intended. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Jesus.
Thank you, DJ. We have just under a minute left. If there are any additional thoughts or comments, Tran has been here the whole time. She let me know. She had to turn her camera off for a few minutes, but she has been listening in. 45 seconds if there are additional thoughts or comments on this application. And again, DJ is here to help us make sure we are keeping equity in mind as we are grading these applications. So thank you for those reminders, DJ. If there are no further comments on this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Ursula, Laura, Cecilia, and everyone else, thank you. Our next application up for review is Hecha de Oro, presented by Oro Dance Company. Laura and Sherry are our primary and secondary. And Laura, whenever you're ready to begin.
Hecha de Oro, this was generally a strong application for me. It's a dance company. Their mission is to elevate Afro roots in Latin dance, fostering inclusivity and innovation by challenging the gender binary in partner dance. They offer dance classes, workshops, intensive performance teams open to the Austin community, professional training to its company members, and their production, Hecha de Oro, is an interdisciplinary production exploring the stories of the ocean through Afro-Latin music. Their mission and key constituencies were clearly stated and fall within the city's priority constituencies for funding. The only question I had, it wasn't clear if an Austin theater was already secured for the event that seeks to perform for 2 weeks in Austin in late 2024, and being intimately aware of the venue crisis in Austin, I would have really liked to see a specific venue named there. But overall, this was a clear application that I appreciated reading. So.
Thank you. Secondary, Sherry?
Yes, thank you. I concur with my colleagues' comments. This is a interesting and necessary project for our community, and so I was happy to score this proposal. Everything was clear in terms of its alignment with the city's expectations and requirements and intent of the funding. So great job.
Having heard that feedback from the primary and secondary panelists, are there any other comments, discussion points, or positions that may not be aligned with these comments that anyone would like to share? Okay, when we're scoring on the rubric based off of the rubric, a perfect score means that you believe that the applicant has done everything to meet the expectations of the rubric, and scores below that, as is your prerogative, will reflect that accordingly. So with that, Jesus, I give it back to you.
Thank you, DJ, and thank you for those reminders. Panelists, if there are any additional thoughts or comments on this application that have not been stated by someone else. And again, we ask panelists not to repeat anything that has been stated already. If they do have differing opinions, then we ask that they have those, or if they have concurring opinions but have similar thoughts, or concurring opinions but their own thought or note that has not been stated, we ask that they repeat those. If they're not, they're in agreement with what has been stated by the other panelists. So seeing no additional comments on this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sherry, Cecilia, Ursula, Tran, and Laura. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is The Breakfast Boogie. Tran and Laura are our primary and secondary, and Tran, whenever you're ready to begin. And while Tran is pulling her application up, a reminder that there's 10 minutes max time to review each application, but the timer will not start until the primary, in this case Tran, starts giving their commentary.
Thanks for that. The proposal I have is breakfast bougie, and they're a music venue. They're requesting 30,000 for an accessible music destination event for families that books a diverse range of performers from hip hop to folk, rock, reggae to mariachi. They want to bring a great live music event to young kids and caretakers. The person who wrote the proposal is an accessible music and art specialist at the Rosedale School locally, and they're wanting to create music performance to families and communities across Austin. My stance on it was I scored it on the higher end. It seemed like a really great opportunity that engages families with diverse music, and to engage in thinking about accessible music, and then thinking about participating artists and local collaborators.
Thank you. Secondary for this application, Laura.
Thank you. I agree with the applicant that this is it's a unique project that Austin could certainly use more family-friendly music activities. I will say it's present in other areas of the application, but highlighting their service and connection to the disabled community would have been really welcome. And I think it could have come into the application a lot sooner, and could have looked at how, because the leadership has that expertise and it's clearly central to how events are put together, that really honing in on that could have strengthened some of the earlier the earlier questions in the application. Thank you.
Okay, with that, are there any panelists who want to offer their assessment? Okay, seeing as there is a wide range in scoring, and we have the time to do so, let's delve a little bit deeper and try to understand where some of the divergence might be if we're scoring to the rubric together. So let's see here. I am looking at. Okay.
I'm happy to.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, I struggled with the cultural leadership portion of this section because I didn't get a clear understanding that the leadership was reflecting how broad the key constituencies are. It felt maybe mismatched for the rubric of this specific grant funding for me personally, because I don't see children as facing cultural erasure, or parents and children necessarily facing discrimination as a whole culturally. And so for that was the lens I was looking through when reading this, and it seemed appropriate. It seemed more appropriate for grant funding that is geared towards kids and more organizations that are youth focused instead of cultural erasure. So I think that's where my scores may have been a bit lower than some of the other panelists, because I was waiting to see the very clear focused funding connection between bringing in people facing cultural erasure and discrimination instead of broadly serving children and parents. Although I do think that the organization is wonderful and the programming looks amazing, I applaud them. It just didn't feel like a perfect fit for this specific scoring guide for me.
You're muted, DJ. DJ, you're muted.
Sorry. If we have time, thank you for that, Ursula. If we have time, Laura, I saw your hand, and then I'd like, if time permits, for either Cecilia or Sherry to weigh in on what they've heard from their co-panelists, and from their vantage point and their scoring. Go ahead, Laura.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify that there were many areas where they did not align with the rubric to receive the full points that could have been eligible there. I in my feedback wanted to pull out a space where I thought one of the strengths of the application was, and suggest that going forward, they might really find more of that connection between their disability advocacy and their mission and programming.
Okay, thank you for that, Laura. And having heard that feedback, looking at the people who scored on the higher end of the rubric, would you offer your insights as to how you're receiving your panelists' differing opinion?
I'm happy.
Cecilia or Sherry?
Oh,
Go ahead.
Yes, thanks, DJ. I'm happy to share. I was really attracted to the idea of a shared event between parents and kids, and so many of the activities described in this application that I think would enhance understanding for many communities in this particular event. And I agree with my colleagues that yes, there even in receiving a high score from me, there were a few points that I would have loved to have awarded for just a tad more specificity. So I think in that regard we agree. Thank you.
Okay, Cecilia, any feedback or not necessary, but if you'd like to?
Yes, it's a wonderful idea, wonderful proposal, but I do believe, I mean, how I see it is that it's too broad. It's, it's like for everybody, which is fine, but it's for everybody. I don't see any focus on key constituencies and the community groups that, we need to prioritize.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And with that wonderful feedback from the panelists, I would like to remind you that your scores should reflect, based off the rubric, the feelings that you've expressed. If you are finding that it's too broad, too general, and I'm looking at scores that reflect perfect scores. As a facilitator, I want to take a point of order and just say, you don't have to change your score, but that might be something you want to go back and revisit, because that does not align with the rubric. And my job is to make sure that we are aligning with the rubric. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jesus. And thank you.
Yes, thank you, DJ. Thank you, panelists. Again, everything is aligning with the rubric. I forget what the comment was, but there was something about, I think it was Laura's comment about items earlier in the application. A reminder, we ask that you look beyond grantsmanship to the extent possible. If something is in there, but in a different section, you can consider that in your scoring. But again, at the end of the day, as DJ was saying, you have to tie your score back to how they addressed the review criteria. So we have just under 2 minutes left for this application. Any additional thoughts or comments? Laura, yes.
Yeah, I'm just also being reminded in looking through this that they did not have a description of their proposed budget expenses, which would have been really helpful to have that.
Thank you. Just under 1.5 minutes left. Staff has not reviewed their applications in full, but glancing at their budget, I see they have budget amounts listed, but there is no description in column C for the detailed description, as Laura was pointing out. 1 minute and 4 seconds left. Any final thoughts or comments on this application? Still have a little bit of time if you do have any.
Any questions? Follow-up questions from anyone?
If there are no further thoughts, comments, questions, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sherry, Tran, Cecilia, Laura, and Ursula. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Unwound Sound. Ursula and Tran are our primary and secondary. And Ursula, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. The Unwound Sound is seeking $30,000 to promote their program of an experimental orchestra that supports Austin's diversity and reflects the makeup. And I think I love that they're creating a space for more experimentation through collaboration in the form of orchestra. I think that is a very noble and important art form to keep alive in the community. I think the main part that I was struggling with was that the description of their key constituencies was very broad. And I kept coming up against this in this process, that when the key constituencies are defined in really broad terms of serving music lovers of Austin, or kind of more talking about diverse artists and audience members, without having clear definition of where they're focusing that, it's really hard for me to score throughout the rest of the application with confidence, because I don't have the main point of it. It's meant to serve everybody. It's meant to celebrate the diversity of Austin as a whole. And while these are wonderful and meaningful missions, for this specific grant, I'm looking for, how are you going to serve very specific communities that have been cut out of opportunities? And I don't feel like that question was answered clear enough for me to be scoring it on the highest scale. But I really love that they are based in collaboration. I think that is wonderful, and it speaks to the nature of the art form. And that certainly is a great way to have community building. I was also left wanting more for the cultural leadership section. They outlined the business organization demographics, or they mentioned as outlined in business organization demographics section above. Like it was said before, we don't get to see that section of the grant. So telling me that I have to refer to a different section that I don't have access to made it impossible for me to score that section appropriately. So I kind of felt a little blind in that section, and that's one of the heavier weighted scores. So I needed more clarity, I needed more detail, and I needed more focus to understand why this specific grant funding was appropriate for a program that is needed, but the acute description wasn't there for me.
You, before we move on to the secondary, just the section 1 and section 2 that Ursula was referring to with the demographics and the address information, those are not seen by the review panelists. So any reference to that, they're not going to have seen those to know what that was in reference to. Secondary, Tran?
Yes, I agree with a lot of the comments that Ursula shared. I think for me, when anything is like even orchestra and classical music already is can be very exclusive. And so in that regards, there was, that mention about like community kind of outreach, how to make it more accessible. In addition, the proposal had included, working with, PBS public media, which can be great, but at the same time, they're also not the most accessible space to, and certain kind of diverse community that aren't kind of tapped into that. And they had also proposed being at a church too, like a series of, concert events at a church. And that was another thing that it wasn't made reference, because that in itself can really cut access. And also, I think in the language access, they basically mentioned that they don't have the financial support for that. So they're not able, as much as they want to have interpretation, to have more access, but that's not something that they're able to at the moment. So just all these things, it made it so that it felt like there could have been more elaboration or more strategic in thinking about how to, really address some of these challenges that can make the application stronger. So on my end, it wasn't as strong as it could have been.
Thank you, panelists, for that feedback. Are there other panelists that would like to weigh in with comments that have not yet been made or with differing opinions? Sherry, did I see your hand?
Yes, and I guess I just wanted to indicate that, you know, we've commented about the rubric and the, you know, there's lots of terminology that we hope to explore as we look at these applications. And I felt compelled to say that the applicants' descriptions of their activities in the context of that rubric and some of those definitions that we as a community have committed to do better in, help breathe life into that is really something that as a panelist I look for and actually was excited about when I saw it. And so would like to just strongly encourage the applicant to excite us about the details of their program.
Yes, Cecilia.
Yes, is this a main note to you and to all the listeners? My apologies. The comment I made previously was about the previous proposal. My apologies. I was looking in the wrong place. So if you saw a discrepancy with my comments and rubric, I was looking at the wrong place of my notes. My apologies if I caused a confusion. I have nothing to add to this proposal.
Okay, with that, Jesus, I'll turn it back to you unless there are any other comments from panelists. All right, thank you.
And thank you for that clarification, Cecilia. I will say, just in regards to, and I don't think this is where the comment was going with the church, just about being more, you know, open for those who maybe are not necessarily comfortable in religious institutions is the intent I got, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But what I will say is in our guidelines, we talk about eligible and ineligible activities. And so as far as religion or churches in general are concerned, for ineligible activities, religious and or sectarian programming is not eligible. And we state that religious and or sectarian programming or any programming and or services that are solely for the promotion of or consumption by a specific religious order and or a particular sect are not eligible. So again, having an event at a church or having a religious, you know, connotation to it is fine as long as it's open to all members of the public, not just to adherents of that particular faith. With that being said, we have just over a minute and a half left. Any additional thoughts or comments on this application? If there are no further comments on this application, oh, Cecilia. Oh, no. Okay. You were coming off mute, so I didn't know if you had another comment. If there are no other comments, please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sure, Sherry, Laura, Ursula, and everyone else. Thanks, y'all. Next application up for review is Shed Shows. Cecilia and Ursula are our primary and secondary. And Cecilia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, this proposal is about a fashion show showcasing Central Texas queer, trans, and BIPOC artists. So it's a fashion show. They talk about a goal of that they want to break down the barrier between craft and fine art. I don't know what that means. I don't know how realistic that is, because that's, yeah, I don't know. So it's also the marketing proposal, I found it vague. The section of payment to artists needs to be divided into a smaller section. It is not clear how much the artists or anybody else are going to get paid. This is going to take, schedule is planned to take place in the spring of 25, and the exhibit will be on view for 6 weeks. They said they intend to collaborate with local artists, models, actors, and performers. It would have been useful to me as a reviewer to get just a little bit more information about those collaborations. I found that very broad. And it's, I must say, it's like the fashion show, I think, is with the intent to be a fundraiser. So I don't know how that works, if they are getting grant money from the city of Austin and at the same time it's a fundraiser. I don't know if that's a problem. And that's all I had to say.
Thank you. I'll take a look at some of those comments for the application and provide some clarity in a bit. But while I'm looking at that, Ursula, secondary, your comments, please.
Yeah, I see a section where it says providing resources to make, show, and sell new work, and raising money for the artists and for the shed shows during the opening event. To me, offering the artists an opportunity to sell their work at the show to profit from their artwork is not the same as a fundraiser. So I didn't interpret this application as a fundraiser in addition. But if there's clarity that can be provided, I would love to hear it, because clearly we interpreted that differently. I loved this concept. I thought it was a really great representation of intersectionality every step of the way. They took a lot of care in every part of the description of the activities, of their mission, of their backgrounds, to really highlight the intersectionality that comes with uplifting the queer and BIPOC and trans communities. And for me, that set this application apart because of their how clear and thoughtful they were at expressing this throughout the whole application. And so I was really jazzed on it. I would love to come see it. I do think there was some room for growth. Let's see which section. And I believe it was the accessibility section. The accessibility section was pretty much the bare minimum. So there was room for growth there for me. I also agree that I would have really appreciated more information about how the artists were going to be paid in the budget. And then when they talk about language accessibility, they use "we would love" instead. Oh, and to me, when you're writing "I would love to do this" or "provide this," it doesn't make me feel very confident in the prioritizing aspect. I need to see that you're researching, that you've found people to do the work that you want to do. If you want to provide language accessibility and you want to provide beyond ADA accessibility, you can't just put in "I would love to." I need to see the movements and the specifics of how you're going to implement that in order to have confidence that it will actually happen with this funding. So for me, those were the weaker parts of this program, but the mission and the key constituencies and the intersectionality were really strong for me.
Thank you so much for that feedback. At this time,
Can I offer a bit of clarity? Yeah. So staff has not reviewed these applications in depth prior to today, just cursory reviews for eligibility, but looking through the cultural activities section. So for the fundraiser, they do talk about in the last paragraph, the opening reception will take place in spring 2025 and the exhibit will be on view for 6 weeks. So that part is eligible. Later on, like a couple of sentences down, but still in that paragraph, they do talk about the fashion show fundraiser. And so that part would not be eligible if it is billed or marketed as such, but if they do score high enough to receive funding, staff will work with them before entering into the grant paperwork to make sure only the eligible activities are included. The other thing I wanted to comment on was like the craft versus fine art. And so in visual arts. And if someone here is a visual artist or has that expertise, maybe they can speak to it better than I can. But craft art is usually thought of not really as fine art. And so I think that was, I don't want to put words in the applicant's mouth. So again, it should be more clear. But in general, craft art is seen as kind of a lower, if you will, form. It's not a fine art. So I think maybe that's what they were trying to get at in that comment. With that being said, we have just over 3 minutes left, so I'll open it up if there are comments from other panelists.
Laura? Can you, oh, I'm sorry. I can't tell if I lost my screen. Okay, there we go.
I lost
did-
my voice.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, right out of the gate with the key constituencies, it was a little bit of a stumbling block for me because it started out with the Greater Austin art community, LGBTQ+, Latinx, Black, Asian American, University of Texas at Austin. It was a very broad swath of communities. Later on, when they drill down and describe their project, they're a lot more specific with the communities that they serve. But that opening key constituencies for me felt very broad and not really focused on inclusive of many of the groups eligible for funding from this grant, but not exclusive to those groups. And so there were several places where my scores were on the road. The history of service, I felt kind of repeated most of the information that was in the key constituencies and didn't add a lot of depth regarding their history of service, but I will go back through that before I finalize that score. So that was where I was on the application. And then some of the issues that the other panelists have brought up, I felt as well. Thank you.
You're muted, DJ. We have a minute and a half left. She's probably asking if anybody has additional thoughts or comments.
I thank Chief Laura for that wonderful feedback as well. And I was calling on Sherry specifically for her to weigh in on how she is receiving this feedback and how that informed her experience with this application.
Okay, we all seem to be having have muting issues. This one was a little tough for me. I would have liked a little more detail in some areas. And I think that you know, probably some of my previous comments about exciting us around the detail of how you operationalize the sort of the mechanics of what the city is looking for in these in the awarding of these funds. So I think some of my thoughts have been pretty well covered, but just a reminder to excite us about the you know, how your organization is contributing to the fabric of our community.
Thank you. Jesus?
7 seconds. Any last minute thoughts? And we are at time. If you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Ursula, Cecilia, Tran, Laura, and Sherry. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is East Side Magazine. Sherry and Cecilia are our primary and secondary. And Sherry, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. This application is East Side Magazine, and they're requesting $30,000. And the activity that they are seeking to provide for the community is an expansion of the magazine itself. So adding pages to the magazine, and then also a series of networking opportunities or magazine release parties to create deeper community engagement around some of the subject matter that may be reflected in the magazine itself. From a from a review standpoint of this application, so communication, of course, is a stronghold and necessarily a need in communities to, you know, elevate the voices of our community. And so that hands down is so important. This proposal was sort of a mid-range in the scores for me, because the expansion of the magazine itself without more detail appears to be more of a business concern versus the direct connection with the enhancement for the community. So I had some questions about that I didn't clearly see an answer to in what was shared. It also was unclear to me because there is a publishing aspect. I would have liked to have seen a little more depth in how the community itself and the constituencies actually play a part in decision making, because there's definitely a decision about, you know, what can go into a magazine and what can't go into a magazine. So having a little more clarity about that. I like the idea that there would be community dialogue around the actual items that are featured in the magazine. So that part of it was really exciting and good to see. But I would appreciate it a little bit more detail on the magazines, how the magazine itself saw that it was aligning with the city's interest in this particular grant making opportunity.
Thank you. Secondary, Cecilia?
Yes, I think this proposal is a perfect fit for the Elevate grant. It clearly describes their project, and I find it unique in its focus on community groups that are at immediate risk of cultural erasure and displacement in Austin. The title says it all. East Side Magazine. They are recording history. This is a history project, and it's a history project about the heart of Austin, the heart of the East residents that continue to be displaced, the heart of the art of Austin. And I hope it gets all the funding it needs. It has, they said they have a 9-year history serving the residents of East Austin, and they're telling stories. They're telling stories about East Austin, about Austin and our community. And it was a pleasure to read this proposal.
I was so caught up in what Cecilia was saying, I forgot that I had a role to play. Are there any other panelists that would like to offer their feedback? We do have a wide divergent in scoring. And anytime I see this, it alarms me at some level as the facilitator, because if we're scoring on the same rubric, we should be thoughtful about, you know, of course, it's wonderful when we find a project that we are excited about, but I hope and would like to reiterate the importance of gauging that enthusiasm through the lens of the rubric that is before us as it fits to the grant's intent. So with that, are there any other comments from panelists who either have something new to add to what Cecilia has enthusiastically submitted, or has a different opinion? Yes, Laura. Oh, I'm sorry, Ursula, you'll go next. I apologize. I saw Laura first.
I just have a quick one regarding accessibility and language accessibility, that the response is focusing on accommodations for the print publication, which is fantastic, but it doesn't talk about potential accommodations for the in-person networking events. And I think that that's a missed opportunity there in both language accessibility and accessibility, that they could really explore that.
Thank you. Ursula?
I was really impressed by their commitment through the pandemic. I think that showed me a lot of their work ethic and how they're engaged with the community and how it seems to be going both ways, which really impressed me. The part that was hard for me to score was I didn't feel like I got a very clear I didn't see the cultural leadership have the majority of applicants reflecting the lived experience. So I was unable to give them the highest score for that. And then that also influenced a lower score further on when they say we intend to work with cultural leaders, but none are named. I would appreciate if the research has been at least somewhat done, so I know who the cultural leaders you're going to be reaching out to with this funding. If you yourself are not reflecting the lived experience, that was an important information for me that I didn't feel was clear enough for the higher scores. But as far as the concept and the impact was absolutely there, and that was no problem to see come through in the application.
Thank you. Based off of that feedback, are there any panelists that would like to respond? Okay. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Jesus.
Thank you, DJ. Thank you, everyone. Always like to hold a little space as you're kind of reading through your notes. Reviewed about 25 or so applications for today, 27, I believe. Or if you're thinking about if you have a comment that hasn't been already stated by someone, we have just over 2 minutes. So any final thoughts or comments on this application? If there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Cecilia, Sherry, Laura, Tran, and Ursula. Thank you, everyone. And I believe we are up for a break, so we will pause the recording. And we are back from break. Our next application up for review is TVI Media. Laura and Sherry are our primary and secondary. And Laura, whenever you are ready to begin.
Thank you. TVI Media has a creative practice that they say centers around intersecting Austin's music and visual art scenes, serving musicians in Austin, visual artists, and various underrepresented groups. They're proposing a one-day music and art showcase. Their leadership does represent key constituencies identified by the city, but I would have liked to see intersectional identities more clearly defined in the proposal, as well as in general, I would have loved to see a lot more specificity throughout their proposal, specific service providers in the accessibility section, specialized language activities beyond just beyond the minimal programming, which is including a band on the roster. I would have liked to see more of a breakdown of their budget. So it was hard to get a comprehensive understanding of this proposal when I wanted more details throughout the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Secondary, Sherry?
And I agree similarly with my colleague that more specificity would have been extremely helpful. It sounds like an exciting project. This application did, based on the content that was there, get a higher range score for me. However, the places where information was missing, it was, significantly missing, and I was unable to award points as directed by the rubric. So those would be my comments.
Okay, with that, if we have panelists who would like to offer a differing or concurrent opinion that has not already otherwise been expressed, now is the time to please chime in. All right, hearing no additional feedback from panelists, going once, going twice, I will turn it back over to Jesus.
Thank you, DJ. Thank you, panelists. Again, we have advised panelists not to repeat anything that has already been stated, but if they do have differing opinions, we would like to hear from those. If they have similar opinions, but just a different note or thought that has not been covered by someone else, we would like to hear that as well. But if they're not saying anything, it's because they are in agreement with what has already been stated by other panelists. I also give them a little bit of time as they're kind of scrolling through their notes, just if a thought came to their mind. They've reviewed, I think it's 27 applications today. Just giving them a chance to look through that. So with all that, oh, Ursula, yeah, go ahead.
I would like to recognize their robust marketing strategy. I thought that was really thoughtful, and I would like to recognize that part of their application because I do agree with what's been said already, but that was a strong part of the application for me.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from other panelists? If there are no further comments, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Cecilia? Sherry? Tran, Ursula, and Laura. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Eileen Chen. Tran and Laura are our primary and secondary. And Tran, whenever you're ready to begin.
Great. Hi there. I have applicant Eileen Chen, who's a multidisciplinary artist, and they're proposing a year-long project for $30,000 titled Redefining Waste Through Art, a Catalyst for Change. This is a year-long project to transform donated materials into art. They'll empower individual to become active collaborator in the creative process, fostering a sense of ownership and responsibility. The artist's creative mission is to catalyze a shift towards a circular economy through transformative art. That drives the artistic and professional pursuits. In this project particular, they're collaborating with refugee women from diverse background, primarily from Asian and Middle Eastern countries. I thought this proposal was really interesting. Just a lot of things that I think is really relevant to what's happening today. They talked specifically about their background as an artist, wanting to engage communities, how their lived experiences inform a lot of their passion and wanting to kind of shift the regenerative and transformative economy. So I was, that really uplift a lot of things that I was like, oh, that's really kind of, really critical during this time, and wanting to engage and talk specifically around accessibility language. So I scored on the higher end just because all of this is so relevant. Some of the question that would have been for me really helpful to flush out is like specifically what is kind of like the activity, kind of like the donated. They talked about engaging the public, the donated materials, community engagement, education, and collaborating with certain like studio spaces and everything. So I think even further into like how do these kind of activity would that transpire to kind of the vision that they're setting out to. Thank you.
Thank you. Secondary, Laura? And you are muted.
Too many screens. All right. Thank you. I agree with what my colleague has stated. I will say, while the applicant is an Asian American woman, that I would have loved to have her connect more clearly to the identified key constituencies in her application. And I would have liked to see how they're a little more detail on how they're involved throughout the artistic process of this project. which I think is similar to a comment that's been made, that just a little more clarity about how that art was shaped. And I felt that the applicant's artistic practice has evolved to partner with these organizations representing marginalized communities. Thank you.
Okay, as there is a great deal of divergence in this in this particular scoring of this applicant, let's have a robust discussion about it, because if we are using the same rubric and the same guidelines, I am of the opinion that we should not have this much discrepancy. And so with that, without any pressure on any particular panelist, let's discuss. Let's see if we can get some of these questions answered and gain some clarity, hopefully, for other panelists. And with that, Ursula?
Yeah, I'm probably on the lower end because I have a major concern of are these refugees getting the opportunity to tell their stories creatively, or are they being used as labor? That is what is not fully clear. I understand that offering job opportunities is very important. But for this specific grant, I'm not seeing a cultural connection of the artwork being collaboratively created by the refugees. They're more being hired to process the materials the artist uses to create her vision, which I think is wonderful and important. And I agree that what she's talking about, I have no criticism for the process that she's in creating and bringing notes to waste. But I think to match the guidelines of this specific grant, the refugees need to have more of a creative voice, more power from the top, and not be hired labor. While also she talks about briefly mentorship, which I think is important. She seems to be the main artist, and she seems to be in control of the artistic vision overall. And that for me created some lower scores based on equity and really letting the refugees tell their stories through craft and not processing her materials so that she can tell her story through recycled waste. So I think that was the main definition for me that led to a lower score.
Thank you so much for that. And based off of that, is there any feedback? Is there any concurrence with what Ursula is saying? Any divergence? Let's discuss. Okay, Cecilia, please.
Yes, although I love the proposal of transforming discarded materials into beautiful functional creations and providing fair wage, dignified work to women refugees, I do not see the connection between the proposal and community groups that are at risk of cultural erasure. So my heart is, with all the organizations and programs that help refugees. But I do not think that this aligns with the Elevate grant. Funding should come from somewhere else. I also worry about, there's some place in the proposal that says, these women, they face barriers, like cultural barriers, like they have to work from home. And this is what is proposing, is that they work from home. And so what are we doing? Reinforcing those cultural restrictions? If we are talking about giving opportunities to these women, then we should be thinking about perhaps, I don't know, that they get out of the house and learn English, be an ACC, I don't know, but it's like, it just, I cannot connect those two issues. So I could not give a high score. And and I don't know if I mentioned this, but yeah, it's like refugees have recent people that have arrived recently to our community, and they're very welcome. But they are not part of the groups that are at risk of cultural erasure. It's just by definition, it's a timing thing.
Okay, any feedback from other panelists based off of Cecilia's comments, or do you have any other opinions you would like to share about this particular applicant? Sherry, do I see your hand?
Yes. I don't know if it's specifically in relation to any particular comment. I just would offer a different view. I think this is a application that sort of celebrates the intent of this project. And while I certainly hear and appreciate the comments, I would like to highlight the economic independence that is proposed around this project and the challenges that may begin to be illuminated by a project of this type in the Asian community, and the opportunity to create connections that would also highlight other burdens of Asian women, and one that was mentioned, of course, or two that were mentioned, was childcare and limited English proficiency. So from my vantage point, this connection between employment and connection to the community for a somewhat, non-traditional project creates great opportunity for us to illuminate issues while also, creating art and recycling. But I agree. I mean, this was not it scored high for me, but there were just some, areas where points had to align with the expectations of the rubric. Thank you.
And I will say in the 5 seconds we have left that key constituencies that are prioritized are those at risk of cultural erasure and displacement, and other applicants can list other key constituencies. We are at time, so just consider that as you are finalizing your scores on this application, and please let me know when you have done so. Sherry, Cecilia, Ursula, Laura, and Tran. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Platoven ATX. Ursula and Tran are our primary and secondary. And Ursula, whenever you are ready to begin.
Thank you. This organization is requesting $30,000 to put on a free week-long workshop open to the public called Platoven ATX to teach the basics of music creation and production to children of all ages who are interested in learning the new world of making and producing music. They say generally that they want to reach underserved communities and the general public. So this is something I've continually come up against. It's just the broadness of serving all children of Austin who are interested in music, with the intention of helping marginalized communities, but I didn't see enough clear plans of action with leadership from the communities that they're aiming to serve to have enough confidence that this was an appropriate use of this specific funding. I do think it's a wonderful program from how it's described, and the applicants are clearly professionals in their field, and I do have a great appreciation for their dedication to showing kids the production side of music. It was also another issue of our children facing cultural erasure or marginalization. That doesn't fall into that category for me and my understanding of how the training materials explained it. So this seemed like it would be really appropriate for youth programming based funding and grant programs. I think this is a very important program and I hope it does get funded, but my scoring was pretty mid-range because of the specifics of cultural erasure connected to this grant funding requirements.
Thank you. Secondary, Tran?
I agree. My scoring was also mid-range too, and there was just a couple of factors. I mean, they mentioned wanting the free week-long workshop for kids in music. Like they treated it like 10 to age 16, but when it comes to say even like language, they say they have a volunteer staff. When it comes to like marketing, they're focusing on basically Facebook and Instagram ads, which kind of shout out to me like they're, it's not really focused specifically on communities or their space, there are people they're wanting to work with, but this is generally what we want to do. And so that adds to that, comment about just not being really clear about how to really be specific and targeted, especially towards outreach to when there's such a need in local community. And so that was the part that made it more mid-range for me, but definitely critical need, but there's just so many things that could have made it even stronger.
Okay, hearing the feedback of our primary and secondary, let's discuss. Again, as panelists, I would like to encourage you to offer your feedback on why you scored, not exactly how you scored, but your rationale. So Ursula, I thought I saw your hand. Did I see your hand? No, I'm sorry.
No, but I would like to add that I think it's important to pay attention to their budget because their marketing budget is 3 times what they're planning on paying the musicians. And most of that's going to Facebook and Instagram ads. And to me, this specific funding is not intended to go into the pockets of Facebook and Instagram. So that was a red flag for me. It's just the use of funding. I would much have preferred them to showcase that this funding would at least be going to leaders in the community that are going to help them reach the underserved children that they look to serve, and also the artists that they're showcasing and the musicians that they want to that are going to be teaching the children.
Thank you for that, Ursula. Is there anyone else that would like to weigh in with something that has not been expressed previously or with a differing perspective? Yes, Laura.
Sure. I'll just mention along the lines that I had some issues with the budget as well, including the van being used in accessibility services, which is used to transport equipment. They did not receive a high score from me, and I want to be upfront about that. I didn't find them specific enough in targeting the city's identified key constituents. This is, as was stated, it's just a very broad focus, even though it's a fantastic focus. And the history of service as well. And it was just unclear to me how the cultural leadership represented their, any of the city's key constituencies through lived experiences. So while equity is a consideration in the free event, it was kind of unclear how their key constituencies were involved in the development. There were just a lot of necessary details that I think would be great for them to include when they apply again. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully that feedback will help inform the panelists individually as you review your scores. And with that, I will, unless there's any further comments, I'll turn it back over to Jesus.
DJ, thank you, panelists. If there are any additional comments on this application, again, not repeating what has been stated, but if you have either a different thought or even if it's similar, but a different comment that has not been stated by someone else. Seeing as there are no further comments on this application, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Ursula, Cecilia, Sherry, Tran, and Laura. Thank you. Our next application up for review is Alante Flamenco. Cecilia and Ursula are our primary and secondary. And Cecilia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, this, as the title of this proposal says, it has to do with flamenco song and dance. I don't believe this proposal is aligned with the guidelines with an Elevate grant. I don't think there's any connection with community groups that are at immediate risk of cultural erasure and displacement in Austin. And I want to make give some additional details. The writer of the proposal states that she is a Mexican immigrant and musician and has lived and created art in Austin over 20 years. It sounds like me. I mean, it's like that's my background. That's who I am. I'm not saying I'm that person, but what I'm trying to tell you is that I share a lot in terms of the background of the writer. And I find certain things that I would like to point out. In the proposal, I read that the writer says that flamenco is the art of the marginalized communities of that area. They talk about south of Spain, including the poor and those of Roma, Sephardic, Jewish, and Muslim background. I do not agree with that. Flamenco, like ballet, like playing golf, has nothing to do with the poor. Growing up in Mexico, I mean, children and youth who could take flamenco lessons, ballet lessons, golf lessons, those were children from families that could afford it. And there's a clear distinction. So the proposal also describes the group, their key constituencies: Spanish speakers, Latinx, Hispanics, and Afro-Latino immigrants, women who appreciate flamenco historical validation of feminine strength and resilience. I love flamenco, and it's an art form. It's a beautiful, dance and music and song. But if I don't find the connection with that. I mean, many of the lyrics that I hear in flamenco songs are very misogynist, like many that I hear in ranchero songs, in mariachi songs. So, I mean, I respect them as an art form, but they are really not connected to feminine strength and resilience. So I find it very hard to, after reading that, go past and be able to give a realistic rubric. I do believe that I find this proposal with high risk of cultural appropriation and other issues.
Thank you. Secondary, Ursula.
Well, first I would like to thank you for that background, because I don't have the same understanding or history of flamenco that you do. So giving me that structure to work from will very much change my scores, because I had to just take the information that was provided in this application, because I don't have much interaction or information about flamenco. I really had to trust the applicant to be historically accurate with their descriptions. And if they weren't, then my scores are different now, because I was really impressed that the events were going to be free. I thought that was important. And I didn't know that flamenco was a dance for the affluent, and if they are misleading in that language, then I do take issue with that, because that was not how it was communicated to me. And so I was operating on the information they gave me, and I scored this fairly high because they clearly have years of experience and a passion for the art form. But if it's not being expressed accurately, then I do take issue with that, and I'll have to review my application. So I really appreciate that background that you can provide with your lived experience. And that's one of the reasons why I think this panel discussion is the most important part of the process, because I don't have that lived experience. So I'd like to take time to re-navigate this thoughtfully, because that changes a lot of how I looked at this application.
Okay. I'm going to take a point of privilege here, Jesus. It is very, very important. While I appreciate the comments that are being made, there have been a couple of instances that have left me very uncomfortable, in the sense that we are scoring applications based on a rubric for the services and the experiences that they can provide through and for marginalized communities, and to reduce that in any way to commentary that has not been vetted and may not be universally accepted by entire communities is not okay. It's just not okay. This is not the purpose. We are not here to debate whether a cultural activity is rooted in richness or poorness. That is not a requirement of the rubric. Okay?
I will say also, we've got about 3 minutes left, so if there are other, but I do want to say also that they're talking about the history of flamenco, and I don't know that history myself, but from Spain, so which may be different from Mexico, and the applicant is a Mexican immigrant, as he stated in the application. So with that being said, are there other thoughts or comments? We have just under 3 minutes left for this application. Sherry?
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Sherry, go ahead.
Okay. I scored on the higher end for this application, and just wanted to say that I found the application to be very thorough and aligned with my interpretation of the rubric and the intent of the program that will ultimately result in funding. That's my comment.
Thank you. Cecilia, did you have something you wanted to say? We have just over 2 minutes left.
Yes, I'm confused about your comment, DJ. Was it about what I said or what is in the proposal? I want clarification in that. Because I talk about poor because it is in the proposal. I didn't bring it up. So I want clarification about the comments that you made.
Yes.
You said it's not acceptable. Is it not acceptable from me, or is not acceptable in the proposal?
It's not acceptable for the process. We're
So
entitled
again, we have about 1.5 minutes left. Okay. So everything that you're scoring needs to tie back specifically to the review criteria. And so the history of the art form, unless it ties back specifically to the review criteria, should not be considered. Again, you're only considering what's in the application and how it addresses the specific review criteria. So I think that's, and just in the interest of time, because we have like 1 minute and 10 seconds left, I do want to open it up if other panelists have additional comments.
Thank you, and I concur.
Thank you for that, all that information and clarity. That helps a lot.
I will just say,
go ahead, Laura.
I will just say this was one of the higher scored applications for me. As I know we're short on time. And I don't have any major comments, but I did find that they aligned with the city's rubric for receiving those points. Thank you.
20 seconds if there are any final thoughts. So again, thank you, DJ, for the reminder about equity, and thank you, panelists, for the thorough job that you're doing. We've got 5 seconds left. So again, just please keep in mind how responses tie back to the narrative or to the rubric when you're scoring your applications. And if you will let me know, please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Cecilia, Laura, Tran, everybody else, thank you. Our next application up for review is The Gay Agenda Presents No Body Passes. Sherry and Cecilia are our primary and secondary. And Sherry, whenever you're ready to begin. And again, the 10-minute timer will start once the primary starts giving their feedback.
This proposal is requesting 30,000. And well, Jesus has already read the title, so I guess I'll move forward. This was a high scoring proposal from my view, very much aligned with the rubric that is identified for this process. The project itself I'm sorry, the key constituencies here are identified as an opportunity to create a platform for marginalized LGBTQIA plus comedians. It has, well, it initially started in that way. It has evolved into a space for all LGBTQIA plus artists to be seen and valued. And the project itself includes a visual art exhibit, a variety show, an interactive portion that encourages the audience to participate for introspection and dialogue. And the applicant has been very detailed about the components of the project and has given information in each identified area, including the intersectional identities participating from people of color, transgender, expansive disabled individuals, deaf and hard of hearing, and so forth. The proposal is comprehensive, and I appreciate the care that has been given in providing the information.
Thank you. Secondary, Cecilia?
Yes, I think this proposal aligns very well with the Elevate grant. Their key constituencies are very clearly defined, and everything, who, what, when, where is clearly defined. I really like also the fact that they have a collaboration with social services, which I think is fantastic. They partner with Kind Clinic and Ashwell for health services during events, and also Breathe with Pride and Clear Air. So to provide, tobacco-free and COVID-safe places, I think that's awesome. And everything is I praise this proposal in content and clarity and alignment with the Elevate grant guidelines.
Okay, we have a little bit of time to discuss other panelists' input. Either, okay, Laura, I see your hand.
I also, this is a high scoring application for me. I really appreciated it. It was so economical that there was a couple opportunities to maybe add some depth to the answers, and I would have appreciated learning more. I do want to give a special shout out to this budget, which was just really comprehensive, very detailed, and included extra funds not coming from the Elevate grant, and I appreciated getting that comprehensive picture of the project. So thank you.
I thought this proposal was one of the best representations of actually implementing inclusivity on one of the broadest levels I've ever seen, from offering non-alcoholic beverages to be mindful of sober attendees, all of the collaborators that they work with to really implement accessibility for people from a broad range of disabilities. I was just so impressed by them not just listing what their intention was, but how they were going to achieve their intention. And that really set them apart for me. So I gave this a really high score.
Thank you. Are there any more comments from panelists or discussion points? Hearing none. Jesus?
If there are no further comments on this application, again, we ask panelists not to repeat anything that has been stated by others. If they're not saying anything, that means they're in general agreement with what has been stated by other panelists. But even if they are in agreement, if there are comments, specific comments or thoughts that you have that have not been stated, and then obviously if you do have any differing thoughts, but any thoughts that have not been stated already, anybody would like to provide on this application? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Ursula, Cecilia, Sherry, Laura, and Tran. Thank you, everyone. We will pause the recording here. We are back from break, continuing on with our next application up for review, which is Shrewd Productions. Laura and Sherry are our primary and secondary, and Laura, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. I did first want to say that I am familiar with Shrewd Productions. As they state in their application, they've been part of the Austin theater community for 19 years. So I am familiar with their work. They, since their founding, have been committed to raising the voices of women. They've evolved to include queer BIPOC artists as playwrights, actors, designers, and directors. They've evolved to include these key constituencies aligned with the city's priority funding groups. Their cultural activities that they're seeking funding for include a new play festival, a holiday burlesque, and a world premiere by a local playwright. The applicant includes examples of career development for playwrights and company members. And as I stated, I'm familiar with many of the artists involved in the projects. However, it's probably good to be mindful that many of my fellow panelists may not be familiar with these artists. So adding context regarding their inclusion and the role they play in the community is always really helpful. I would have welcomed additional examples of mentoring or partnerships, education opportunities, and a better understanding of how, because it's a very broad leadership team that's included in this application, including a board, advisory board, the ACA board, company members and playwrights, how that team operates to serve the key constituencies and kind of what those roles are. It would have been helpful to see a stronger connection between marketing efforts. They did not receive full points in the marketing portion of this from me. because it wasn't clearly connected to the key constituencies served, and how that outreach would work to new audiences in those constituencies, how that would be implemented. So that was my overall assessment there. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry?
Thank you. This was a strong proposal for me, scored really high. I really appreciated their level of detail, the organization through its submission demonstrated its experience in this area. I particularly like the data elements they included in their key constituency response. I really have nothing but good things to say about this proposal. Good job.
Thank you, panelists. Are there any other comments, discussion points, differing opinions to be offered by our panelists? Yes, Ursula.
I think there was a missed opportunity in that I didn't see much focus on the audience. It seemed to be really focused on playwrights and the playwrights benefiting from this funding, which I think is very important. But because of the medium of theater, a huge part of your reach is how you get people to come and interact with it. And I was really missing that factor of their proposal. I didn't see that mentioned much at all. And if it did, it was pretty broad. And it didn't seem to be much of a focus. And I don't think that's necessarily makes them ineligible. But I think that for this funding, why not talk about the expanse of your possible reach if you're using this funding to uplift voices and also invite people who reflect those voices in the community to come see it and to come respond to it and interact with it. And so I would have really appreciated more information like that in this proposal. But I do think that it was really well explained how they're uplifting playwrights, and that's there's not enough resources out there for that art form.
Okay.
So I did appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Okay, seeing as we also have quite a broad range of divergence in this scoring, based off of what has been said by some panelists of what they may not have, experience with this application. Is there any feedback from any other panelists? Okay. Now, a good point here to remind you, whenever possible, the city encourages you to look past the grantsmanship. And if you have experience with an organization that beyond the grant, you are fully capable, allowed to use that in your scoring assessment. And yeah, so with that, I'll turn it back over to Jesus.
Thank you, DJ. Thank you, everyone. Any additional thoughts or comments on this application? Things that you have that maybe have not been stated already, differing thought, concurring opinion, but a thought that has not been stated. If there are no further comments on this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Cecilia and Sherry. Tran. Ursula. And Laura. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Borderless Together Outside. Tran and Laura are our primary and secondary. And Tran, whenever you're ready to begin.
This proposal, Borderless Together Outside, comes from an individual artist. They're requesting 30,000. They identify as being an artist, an arts organizer with an active history of service in the local community. They identify as a queer female artist and an arts facilitator as well. The proposal is a series of 3 educational art and nature meetups and an art exhibition with panel discussion. There's 2 parts to it. The first one is multiple community events, free and open to the public, series of nature-based events, and the second one being the art exhibition with artist-led panels. And they're identify constituent intersectional communities, including non-binary, BIPOC, LGBTQ+, leadership represented in diverse group of 60-ish artists, directly especially in the first year focus. It's definitely a really interesting proposal. I think it's a little different from the bunch that we've seen. So it stood out to me, especially in focusing on environmental, climate, and really working with artists, 60-ish artists, and that's reflected in their payment stipend to artists in their budget. I would have wanted to see more of like how they're like outreaching specifically. Are these existing collaborators already? How are they continuing to connect with local community and creating these community events, nature meetups? Flushing out that would have been more helpful to see how their strategy in going about that. But their ideas are definitely really inspiring, but I'm just curious how that's going to reflect out and translate. Thank you.
Thank you. Secondary, Laura?
Yes, I concur with most of the statements that were just made. They clearly describe their program focus and goals, but I really would have appreciated more specificity regarding collaborators, programs, marketing strategy, as well as accommodations for audience members with disabilities. I thought just adding some more of those details would have strengthened the application. Thank you.
This time, is there any additional feedback from other panelists speaking on topics that have not yet been discussed or with a different point of view about this particular application? Yes, Cecilia?
Yeah, there is a section that I would have liked. I think it was needed. I mean, I needed it, and it was necessary for me to comprehend the core, the heart of this proposal. And it has to do with this, what they call their major mission. It says, a major mission of mine is to make artwork to serve the community in areas of the following intersect. And I'm going to list them. Effects of the climate crisis, racial inequity, attacks on the LGBTQIA community, with a special emphasis on trans youth, women's reproductive rights, the many problems facing asylum seekers and refugees. And here comes the sentence. The underlying causes of all the above issues are linked. And I'm left with that. How are they linked? What are the causes? And I raised this question because if this is the major part of the proposal, it should be explained. It should not be left to the imagination of the reviewer. Let me see if I have.
DJ, you're muted.
Oh, yes.
Because I'm trying to unmute you, Laura, instead of me. I apologize for that. I was on your screen. Is there any, thank you for that. Is there any additional feedback or comments that have not yet been made? Questions that need clarification? Okay. We have already talked about intersectionality and the role that that plays in equity, inclusion, and diversity initiatives. And I would like to remind you all of that very key and important factor at this time. It may or may not, influence your decision in any way. It's not required to, but just as a point of reminder, there are layers and there are lots of ways that discrimination or marginalization can occur. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Jesus.
Thank you, DJ. I was kind of looking to see if I could see anything on the intersectionality question that may have any clarity I could provide. So just kind of reading through that. While I'm doing that, were there any other comments or additional thoughts on this application?
While he's doing that, I would like to call on a panelist for her perspective. And because I just find it interesting how we are assessing. And Sherry, did you have this one really, you knew I was going to call on you. This one seemed to resonate with you really well. And I'd love to hear your, what you took away from this application.
First, I have to unmute, right? Yes, this application in a lot of ways resonated, and I have agreed that there are a couple of spots where we could have benefited from more detail. But from my vantage point, I had hoped to be able to see in responses, just sort of even an attention to and attempt at understanding the issues in play. We all don't always know all the right things to say or the right answers to give, but I have so appreciated the applicants demonstrating where they could, and naturally some did it better than others, but demonstrating an effort to really understand. And so I would commend this applicant because I think in intersectionality particularly, the issues that were listed all come into play, and they affect people differently and at the individual level. So they are linked in different ways for different individuals.
Thank you. We have.
Thank you.
Did anyone else? Oh, that was DJ. Did anyone else have a comment? We have just over 2 minutes left on this application. Oh, Cecilia, go ahead.
Yeah, I found another comment that I had on this application. In the proposal, we find, who, like they list indigenous artists, scientists, park rangers, environmentalists. These terms are too broad. So I don't find there is no plan here. There is not a list of park rangers, scientists, indigenous artists, environmentalists that have been contacted that are willing to participate. There is no, what are they going, they just say a free afternoon or morning of fun. This needs to be defined before it can receive funds. I mean, who have they contact? Because this is at the heart of the proposal, this conversation with indigenous artists, scientists, park rangers, and environmentalists. Who are they? I mean, who are they, even just the options? It's just too broad. It is not defined. It is like, it sounds like a plan, just a wish, instead of a solid proposal.
Thank you for that. We have just over 30 seconds left. I will say, I guess more for the applicant than for the panelists, but with intersectionality, we do talk about how varying parts of an individual's identity can result in that person experiencing special challenges or discrimination that's unique to their lived experience. And so that may be where more of the specificity was wanted. 10 seconds left for any final thoughts on this application. Seeing as there are none, and we're at pretty much time anyway, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sherry, Cecilia, Ursula and Laura, and Tran. Thank you, everyone. That concludes our panel for the day. We will continue the recording just because we did have an application that looked like it was assigned today, but it appears that a mistake was made and we assigned the panelists from tomorrow's panel to review this. That was the final application to be reviewed, the borderless together outside. With that being said, the panel today for panel 9, individual artists and creative businesses, has concluded, and we will pause the recording here.